Hey, how's it going, universe? Welcome to another episode of Zoobox Goes to the Movies. I'm your host, Sean, and today I'm joined with past and future guest Dan Profitt. Thanks for coming back, Dan.
Thank you for having me again, Sean. It's always a blast.
Yeah, we're really looking forward to this episode. Today we're gonna be talking about Paul Verhoeven. We're gonna be kind of talking about Paul Verhoeven's 1997 film. Some say misunderstood, some say classic, some say awful, depending on your perspective. Movie Starship Troopers. But I think the thing that we're probably going to spend a lot of time talking about, and it's kind of interesting to compare and contrast the two different perspectives of the movie and the book, is the source material, Robert HEINLEIN's Starship Troopers. Yes. Robert Heinlein's Starship Troopers. Robert Heinlein is he's kind of the standard for that era of science fiction. He's written a lot of stuff. I mean, he wrote the book that inspired Invasion of the Body Snatchers, called The Puppet Masters. That was kind of his first big thing. And he's a really interesting dude. I don't know how much you know about Robert Heinlein as a guy. Do you know a lot about him? Do you know about his biography at all?
I mean, I know he was a military guy, and I know that he is, a renowned science fiction author. I haven't actually. I tried to start Into the Moon as a Harsh Mistress, but again, it was an audio book.
Yeah.
And it was read by the guy, Lloyd James, who does the Starship Troopers audiobook, and does a great job, but he launches right out of the gate with a Russian accent. I was like, no, I ain't listening to 9 hours.
Yeah, it's kind of like when you listen to audiobooks, I kind of like it when they just do it straight. Like, I kind of like it almost like it sounds like my dad reading to me. My dad wasn't in there making voices. I mean, he give a little slight adjustment or slight intonation here and there, but he wasn't being crazy.
I'd say, I think we're talking over each other a little bit. Lloyd James does a great job with the audiobook, and he does kind of play it straight. But he's one of the reasons that I love the audiobook so much, because he's just got a perfect voice for a calm, cool, collected Juan Rico.
Yeah, and because it makes sense for the character. It's appropriate because it's all through his perspective. It's his voice. It's the narrator's voice, and he's just relaying these stories through the voice of Johnny Rico. So it makes sense that he wouldn't be messing around with voices and whatnot. But Robert Heinlein is a very interesting dude. So he went to the Naval Academy. He went into the Navy, but had to leave because he was sick. He was only in the Navy for a couple years. He actually didn't spend a ton of time in the Navy. And then after he gets out, he basically becomes a socialist, if you can believe that. Do you know who Upton Sinclair is?
Yes, I do. He wrote
The Jungle.
Was it The Jungle? My Industry.
Yeah. Yep. And Upton Sinclair was kind of outspoken. I guess the modern comparison would be like a Bernie Sanders type, like a democratic socialist type of guy. And he actually helped him campaign for governor of California back in the 30s. Because later in his life, and I could not find the Rosetta Stone to figure out why Robert Heinlein later in his life went not super hard in the other direction, but he basically became more of a libertarian. Basically, he became a individualist libertarian. He got really into Ayn Rand, if you know about her philosophy of objectivism.
Because he got a lot of money.
Well, isn't that what happens to everybody that achieves anything? Suddenly they start sliding a little harder to the right. Because you're like, don't take this away from me.
Right.
I mean, once you buy a house and you buy a car, or like yourself, you have a business, suddenly there's stakes in the game, which is an interesting parallel to actually the book Starship Troopers, because it is all about making sure you have stakes in the game. That's what society ends up being kind of built on. But when did you first read the book, or listen to the book rather?
Years after I saw the movie. I gotta say that I started getting into the book. I rediscovered the movie, I guess, sometime when I was out in New Mexico, because I was just, bored out of my mind out there and always looking for new media to consume. And a lot of the memes from Starship Troopers exist out on the internet. But would you like to know more? And I'm from Buenos Aires, and I say kill them all. Which all of those memes, by the way, are from the movie. None of them actually appear in the book.
Yeah.
But, I remember sort of recalling the movie from the 90s and thinking I hadn't really given it that much of a shot. And so when I watched it again with sort of the eye for the satire and everything, and a little more political appreciation, first of all, I thought it was a really fun movie.
Yeah.
A lot more fun than in the 90s. And then I actually appreciated the politics of the Federation more, which we'll get into later. But I thought to myself, this is such a vapid, sort of tiresome movie. People rave about the source material. What's that all about? So I downloaded the audiobook because I never have time to read, and I never have the gumption to actually read when I have the time. And I was immediately taken in. Of course, like I said, Lloyd James, great voice work there. And the book pulled me in with its sort of hard sci-fi. Like
Yeah.
The first chapter where they're doing the combat drop on the skinny planet, and it's going through all the little pieces of technology that go into his drop, and then go into keeping him and his people alive, confusing the enemy. I just started geeking out immediately.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of that in the book. There's not a lot of, I hate to say, there's not a lot of plot in the book.
No, there's not. There's like 2 set pieces, and then everything else is just flashbacks informing his mindset going into the set pieces.
Yeah, and it's all just character building for Juan Rico, who goes through this character arc. It's one of my favorite character arcs. He's a boy who becomes a man. There's a part in the book where he says, I was a C-type student. Well, I was a C-type student. And he goes from being a kind of guy like I was in high school to being, head of the Roughnecks on with Roger Young.
Yeah.
And that arc, that was really interesting to me at the time because I was going through a similar transformation where I was taking responsibility in life for the first time at the end of my 20s, trying to actually build a foundation of a human being over here and what I was going to become and what I was going to do with this world I'm put in. And I really liked Rico's transformation because, he always looks at hard work like it's just something you have to do. And I really like that mentality because, in my profession, we try to weed out people who are going to make a hard time of things. And if you don't want to get in there and get cold and wet and covered in animal crap, which I was actually complaining about to Caitlin today because it happens to me all the time. Can I get 24 hours where I'm not covered in animal shit? No, the answer is no. What I'm trying to say is that I really appreciated his move forward into becoming a man because it was like something that I needed. We live in this distracted adolescence in America where we get to just be kids forever. And I took Rico as a role model for a person who just had no problem stepping into adulthood and responsibility and did it kind of with a little grin. And, so that's how I fell in love with the book. And there was a hard sci-fi element to it, and there's a bit of dry humor in there. And as I grew politically, I kind of sort of appreciated their society more because, my society is currently and falling apart, and I think that the only thing that could probably save it is some kind of like future fascism or something.
Well,
it's into some real deep stuff.
Oh, I'm here for it, man. I think it is interesting because the book actually probably felt a little ahead of its time even when it came out because it came out right before the Vietnam War and before the 60s, which was kind of the social upheaval in terms of the way the social norms and the way people felt about themselves and their roles in life. And then when I thought about it today, I actually wrote down, I said, this book is Heinlein's answer to modernity. Because that's the whole thing about this. It's like somebody has to come in and put things right. Because we lost the plot. We became soft and complacent, and then we kind of went into almost a dystopian hellspace, which is interesting because the framing of this book is actually what you would see in a dystopian novel, but it's just not presented as negative. I mean, that because in most books, just like actually I think that was what Verhoeven did, right? Like he made Triumph of the Will. He thinks this is bad. He thinks the militarism.
And I think that's one of the things that drove me into loving the book was that, there is this authoritarian aspect to what they're doing, but it's not presented as Nazi. It's not presented as icky or wrong. It's presented as a solution to a world that had gone off the rails. And I was getting into it at about the time that we had the first Black Lives Matter stuff going on, and Trump was getting just seeing everything's going off the rails over here. And wouldn't it be nice if we just had somebody like an adult in the room to come over here and put their foot on? And I'm unapologetic. Most of my political beliefs are unapologetically far right. I don't think that there is a multicultural future where everybody gets along. I don't think that that's historically accurate at all. I think that happens to nations like America right now. They balkanize. And so, that sort of authoritarian aspect of it is what attracted me to it, because I think that that's what society needs. And we'll talk about it a little more later, but, I don't have a firm political ideology that I believe in. I think that civilizations need to go in cycles, and you need to understand where you're at in the civilizational arc and kind of move in the right direction.
Yeah, and try to correct for it, right? Like, you would think if we've as a species we do this enough, we're going to figure it out at least one of these times. One of these cycles, somehow we should be able to figure out how to right the ship. And
and I don't think that we can. I don't think that there is any righting the ship. I think that there is only course correction, temporary course correction, and you have to have in times of chaos. Freedom does become a bit redundant in times of chaos like this, and it almost seems like it's too much for people to handle. I mean, freedom has gotten us the highest obesity rates in human history, highest divorce rates, highest abortion rates, highest whatever scummy, shitty thing you want to think of. We've got the best of it now because we have total freedom to do whatever the hell we want. Well, that's not best for the human.
But that's also, it's more than just freedom, though, for that. I mean, we live amidst intense social constructionism at every single level of our society. Everything is being molded and melded, and people are being led in certain directions by government policy and by corporate interests. And
hey, Sean.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Edit.
Cut back in, future Sean. All right, we back? Can you hear me?
We're back.
Okay.
We're back.
Good.
Yeah.
All right. So my answer to the freedom paradigm that you presented would be that I don't necessarily see it as like freedom or individual responsibility being the problem. I think it is that we are inundated and almost attacked by social constructionists at every single level of our existence all the time. There is a self-appointed intelligentsia that is actually pulling levers and undermining, I think, people's civil liberties, people's concept of free will, people's concept of freedom and what that means. And I think actually the book addresses some of that. I really do. I think it does, because that's the entire concept of citizenship in the book, right? It's about, like I said when we first started, it's about getting skin in the game. You need to fucking earn something to be able to have the right. You have to care to be able to be part of this process. And to prove that you care is that you serve in the military, in the framework of the book.
Right.
Because that's something Heinlein recognizes about democracy, about the failures of parts of democracy, right? Like, he recognizes this idea that everybody has a voice, even people that don't give a shit. And I think this is something that we see nowadays. We see completely reflexive, reactionary people are being propped up and given these loudspeakers when they have nothing of interest to say. I thought of this when I was reading part of the book. I was like, do you want to be governed by the people that work at Walmart? Because that's part of our system. That is universal suffrage. And it's kind of an experiment. And I think in some degrees, maybe it is failing a little bit.
It's a total failure. I'm going to say that without shame. And that's
Okay.
one of the things that attracted me to the book was the citizenship thing. At the time, I lived in New Mexico, and, the situation at the border was omnipresent because you're 100 miles from the border or whatever. And frankly, I'm a person who is a nationalist. And I think that you should have to at least be born in a place to have citizenship there, right? Like real 100% true citizenship.
Sure.
One of the things that people would always pull on me is, well, how did you earn that citizenship? And I'm like, okay, let's take it a step further. That's why I liked that concept that was introduced in this book, which is you aren't just born a citizen. You're born a civilian. You earn your citizenship. You earn your right to vote. You earn your right to take part in the process. And while I think they take it to a major extreme in the book by only allowing the military, I think that there should be some kind of system where, even if you're born in America, you have to earn that citizenship somehow. And there should be a delineation between people who are citizens of a country and people who are not. As he says in the book, something given is not appreciated. It has to be earned.
Yes.
And they do point out in the book that there's tension between like merchant marine sailors and the MI because, as much hard work as the merchant marines do, they can never gain their citizenship, and they have had their, workman guilds for centuries and blah, blah, blah. And I think in that scenario, the fishermen are correct. You should be able to earn your citizenship through several different productive and positive contributions to society, not just joining the military. Because as they point out in the book, what that does is create this bloated military that just has, extraneous jobs for whoever wants to show up and sign up. So it almost becomes that the system that they use to create value in citizenship actually devalues it because anybody can just kind of show up and become a paper pusher.
That's true, but they also go out of their way to point out that the how intense going through boot camp is, and that's why there is no penalty for washing out. Anybody can leave at any time. You have to want it. You have to want to go through the fire. Like there is no half measures, and they want to construct a society that is ruled by, for lack of a better word, our betters, right? Like that's kind of I think that's kind of where the position that Heinlein is coming from in the novel, because because he was as a person seemed very concerned with trends of society. I mean, they have this whole chapter in the book that is dedicated to how people stop spanking their kids. Corporal punishment, and how that kind of created a dissonance between cause and effect, and how that led people to thinking they could do whatever the fuck they wanted, like it was a domino effect from the time that they were kids.
Yeah, and that's one of my favorite bits of the book is that history and moral philosophy. The history and moral philosophy sections are my favorite sections of the book. Yeah, that one in particular because it speaks exactly to the times that we're living in now. One of the things that he brings up in that whole monologue or whole scene is how the parks went to shit first. And almost like parks are like this litmus test or a canary in the coal mine for the rest of your society. Can you walk safely through a park at 11 o'clock at night? Can you walk safely through a park at 2 o'clock in the afternoon? Can you walk safely through a park at all? Or has it been taken over by teenage hoodlums who are in gangs and are causing all kinds of shit? And we're in that era of society where the parks have been taken over. The parks have been claimed. And, you have people like the Central Park Karen or whoever who regular people are afraid to walk through parks because if a stranger comes up to them and approaches them, they could be somebody who wants to rob and kill them because that's just commonplace these days. Mm-hmm. And everybody jumped on that lady, but honest to God, if a dude came up to me at the park and started yelling at me about my dog and said he's going to do something I don't like, hey, man, Jack, you know what I'm saying? So I'm saying we are in a portion of civilization that Heinlein is describing in that chapter where those basic fundamental things that should be safe and free have become tarnished, and normal people have no power to change that at all.
Well, that's what struck me when I read the book, or when I listened to the book, rather. Sorry, everybody. I'm sorry I failed you. But I was very struck how prescient it was and how much it actually described current day situations in terms of when it was reflecting on why it changed into what it became. Why they made the citizenship kind of paradigm. It is very much that way, and it's intense. We live in intense times, man. I mean, I just like you said earlier, it's just I just wish there was a clear thinking adult that could at least stand for something, for Christ's sakes. But that's not. But that's not the world we live in. People don't stand for anything, and people acquiesce because they might get bullied on Twitter. I mean, we're talking about fucking politicians, people that have real power.
Yeah.
They're worried about being bullied on Twitter. Twitter has got about 5 million users. There are 320 million people in America. Like, stop. But anyways, I know I agree with you. I see that. I don't know. I struggle with the idea of whether or not I would want something like this, because I do think something like this can go bad. It can go wrong. Heinlein's not presenting that side of the equation. Maybe he's actually hinting at a little bit of it, because if you look in the subtext of some of the story, like you brought up the fishermen, right? Not everybody agrees with what's going on. Not everybody agrees with the system, but might is right in this world, and it's about force, and it's about, and they make the argument. Dubois, the teacher, who in the movie is combined with Ratchik, he makes the case against universal suffrage. He makes the case against for force or for violence.
Well, he makes the case well, and what he points out is that, suffrage, voting, is a form of violence.
It
because
is.
All authority springs from violence. At the end of the day, that's a concept that you can't argue with. If I have a stick and I'm going to beat you with it and you don't have a way to defend yourself, you are at my whim, okay?
Exactly.
So at the end of the day, supreme force is what rules a situation. Now, what modern people tend to forget, because we live in a bubble, is that supreme force actually is the prime mover behind everything. Okay?
Yes.
So whoever wields that supreme force wields the power. And because people think that we can just get rid of things like hierarchy and privilege and power, these things can just be getting rid of. It's like these things are baked into the human psyche. So rather than get rid of them, we have to contain them and control them somehow. Well, what he's making the argument is that, at the end of the day, violence can be something as simple as voting, because you are making sure that other people are doing what you want them to.
Well, because I think, and this is something worthy of discussion, and this is something that people don't think about when they think about voting, when they're calling for draconian fucking legislation. They're talking about hate speech laws, whatever the fuck that means, like, because nobody can define it. And then you want to pass a legislation. But anyways, what I mean is, when you do that, that ends at the barrel of a gun. Everything ends at the barrel of a gun when you make a law.
Yeah.
Because somebody has to enforce it. It has to be enforced. Nobody's going to write you a strongly worded letter, or they might start with a strongly worded letter, but after a while, some cop is going to show up to your house with a gun, and he's going to make you do it. He's going to make you comply, regardless. Doesn't matter. So when people don't take, I think, sometimes these things seriously, and that's what, like, Heinlein is kind of getting at. That's why he wanted to have a litmus test for you to be able to do these things. And that's why it was so hard to get through boot camp. That's why it's so hard, because they want the best of the best. People that have put in time, effort, education, and they have personal stakes, personal skin in the game.
But also they mention that the system has gotten so out of hand that no one can be denied civil service either. Mm-hmm. So if you show up and you're crippled and blind and mute, they will find some kind of service for you somewhere, as long as you can reasonably, prove that your allegiance to the Federation or whatever.
Yeah, and maybe you think that's like a subtle nod to, like, well, maybe this isn't so perfect.
I think it is. I think that Heinlein was a realist, and he understood that there was no perfect system.
Yeah.
And he did point out a few times in the book about how this system just steamrolls everything that it comes across, and it ends up working out for humanity because they get into the war with the bugs. And if we didn't have this society,
well, that's a bonding.
The war with the bugs, we wouldn't have fucking survived. And one of the things that I hate about Paul Verhoeven is his stupid attempt to try to make fascism look bad, or not bad, because fascism can look bad easily. He tried to make fascism look uncool, which is fucking impossible, okay? even if you hate fascism, it looks cool as shit. There's nothing you can do about that. The aesthetic of like Nazi Germany has rippled out into Western civilization. Look at our police uniforms these days.
Oh, for sure.
Just like the Hugo Boss shit that the SS used to wear.
Oh, because it implies confidence, strength, fortitude.
Correct.
I mean, it's just honestly, as an aesthetic piece of aestheticism, that's what you take away from it, almost on a guttural, instinctual level, because it has all these weird identifiers that we identify with strength, I guess, basically.
Correct. And Verhoeven says, I wasn't going to portray fascism as being
I got the quote.
Bad.
I got the quote.
Portray it as being, cool. Like everybody's beautiful, everything's perfect, everybody has enough, they have big weaponry, and all it's good for is to kill some fucking bugs, man. And it's like, okay, let me explain something to you, you dipshit. We are in an intergalactic war with these bugs. They're going to wipe out human beings on literally every planet that we've ever colonized, including Earth. So if we don't have this system, we're going to die. Therefore, the system has become necessary for our survival. So it's hard to make it look bad, you fucking idiot.
Well, let's see, this is where we will slightly divide here a little bit, okay?
I know we do. I've been waiting for this.
I don't think Verhoeven is as clever as he thinks he is. First of all, yeah. I don't. I think the metaphor is obvious, okay? But I do think that what he was intentionally doing was making Triumph of the Will on purpose. The whole movie reveals itself to be a piece of propaganda at the end of the movie, because the last piece of propaganda stars the cast.
Right.
So I think he knew he was doing that. Also, he sees throughout the movie the idea that we're just letting the bugs attack us because we find war to be a unifying concept for the Federation. It's very subtle. It's very subtle. It does not draw attention to itself. But if you watch in the beginning of the movie, the first piece of propaganda talks about like our Star Wars system. We're taking out the asteroids as they come by. And then what happens to Buenos Aires? How did that happen? The same meteor that hit Buenos Aires almost kills Denise Richards. Oh, poor Denise. But almost kills her, almost takes her out while she's out practicing. And somehow the slow-moving giant asteroid made it to Earth and hit Buenos Aires. So there is a kind of an implication that maybe we actually instigated this with the bugs in the movie, not in the book, in the movie, because it's trying to make a point about perpetual war and as it being like kind of a controlling mechanism and how you can get, and then just like Robert Heinlein's book, post it became more prescient as the years have gone on. The movie ended up being kind of a little bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy once we got into post 9/11. I mean, all that kind of stuff, it actually kind of feels relevant to Starship Troopers, our foreign policy anyways, and the ways, some of the stuff that happened.
Right. I mean, they do touch on it in the book a bit as to say, when the asteroid hits, most people say that we want to pull home the MI and ring them around the planet shoulder to shoulder. And he says you can't fight a war with defense. You can't win a war with defense. And the problem that the film and the movie both express, but the film actually expresses it a little better, is the idea of a civilizational expansion coming into contact with another civilization and the push and pull, right? Because no two civilizations ever get together and have Thanksgiving. That's bullshit. That's a lie. That's propaganda. What happens is there's a power struggle, and the civilization that shows itself to be not superior, but the more dominant one ends up calling all the shots.
Yeah.
So what we have here is an enemy that is not going to take any prisoners. It's just going to slaughter everything.
Yeah.
It's not human. It doesn't think like us. It doesn't act like us. And we kind of accidentally, or, maybe on purpose, but accidentally a little bit, went into their space and started to colonize it. And then they showed up and were like, oh, what the hell are you doing here? Slaughter everybody. So the immediate human response is to say one of two things. I'm from Buenos Aires, and I say kill them all, which is my response.
Yeah.
Or, the people who were on TV during the very Paul Verhoeven propaganda.
Dude, I was just going to bring this up.
Talk show parts that are talking about.
I think the idea of a bug that can think offensive.
That's so. I mean, it's so good. I have to give him credit. There is a lot of like RoboCop. I'll buy that for $1 shit in there.
It's because it's from the same writer. Ed
Yeah,
Neumeier.
yeah. And you know, quite frankly, he pulls it off. I mean, the movie's so enjoyable, but it's funny to see him kind of fall flat on his face in terms of trying to make a farce out of fascism when really he just makes one of the best propaganda pieces for it that's ever been done in the modern era.
Which is interesting because actually the thing that people, when the movie first came out back in 1997, it actually was not reviewed very well. I think people liked it. I don't think people understood it. I don't think people got what was going on because, you know, to Verhoeven's credit, he was not tipping his hat. He fucking did it straight. Like he did a straight piece of propaganda. He was not telling you where to laugh. I mean, there are so many funny moments in this movie that you might not even notice. You might even think are just badass. Like Michael Ironside, like the second half of Michael Ironside's character when he becomes the real rat chick is like, you know, when they go to that Mormon encampment that got overrun and they find the guy with the hole in his fucking head and he's like, they sucked his brains out. Like, to me, I was dying, okay? Or when the guy in the same moments later, there's the commander of that base is fucking hiding in like a cupboard and he falls out and everybody's like, officer on deck, attention! Like, it's so ludicrous. It's so, but it's so fucking funny. And the movie is full of little moments like that that makes me think that even maybe Verhoeven just can't articulate himself well. English is a second language for the guy. It's fucking Dutch people. But
never made him white.
I don't like. I don't know if he knew entirely what he was doing. I feel like the writer did. I feel like Ed Neumeier did. And I listened to some of the commentary. I tried to get through the commentary of it. Ed Neumeier has a much more broad historical view of what they're doing, where Verhoeven's like, this is about American imperialism. Like, that was, Verhoeven was stuck on that. Like, you know, Operation Northwoods. You ever hear of it? Like, and Ed Neumeier is more just like, no, I mean, he's like, America is in that spot right now, but if you look at history, there's always been somebody in that spot, and it cycles, like you were kind of saying, like there's cycles to it, and he's trying to have a more thoughtful discussion, and Verhoeven's being Verhoeven, you know? Like, they come out, they shake their tits, I take my clothes off so they feel comfortable.
Yeah, I mean, I think that he does a great job with the movie in some respects, and then in other respects, you're right. He's sort of like not as clever as he thinks he is. Oh. But there's so much about the Starship Troopers universe that it does spring from the movie. I mean, all those one-liners about, the bug is a dead bug. Would you like to know more? I'm doing my part. And all that stuff is great.
These are iconic science fiction things for our era, right? Exactly. Especially if you were of a certain age when this came out. Like, this had such an influence on me. And I didn't know who the fuck Paul Verhoeven was in 1997. I had already seen Total Recall. I knew about Total Recall because my dad had that tape, and I totally watched it when he wasn't home. And but I didn't know who Paul Verhoeven was. I didn't know about his aesthetic and the point he was trying to make. It's just cool. Like, it's just like, wow, this is so wild. This is so different. This is so unique. Even to this day, there is really nothing like RoboCop and Starship Troopers, because I do think they're kind of like sisters. They're kind of like brothers.
I did that, yeah.
Yeah, because they actually, one of the reasons why Ed Neumeier wanted to do Starship Troopers in the way that he did it, because apparently he was a big fan of the book. He grew up with the book, but he didn't want to do the book straight. It's because all of his liberal friends hated RoboCop and called him a fascist. And he's like, I will fucking give you fascism. Yes. That was part of his motivation.
And he did.
Because he's just like, because people, just like another thing, it's like, and this is the thing that drives me nuts, especially about modern day critics, modern day just audiences of anything. If you represent something in a movie, they assume that you are promoting it. Like, they assume, like, just because you have a character, like, this happens all the time. Like, oh, you had a racist character in your story. You're like, yeah? What?
Yeah, because we had to portray a racist character, so, we had to put a racist person in there. People misunderstand art all the time like that. And so with something like this, it's so easy to do, because like the first time I watched it when I was a kid, I want to know more about your story finding it. But when I first watched it as a kid, I didn't realize it was a political movie. I just thought it was a movie about blowing up bugs in space. Yeah,
it was a cool ass fucking military adventure film. It's got a great score. It's fun. It's always changing. It's got every single beat you want. They're in high school. They go to boot camp. They go to war. Rico goes through the ranks through attrition. Like, and at the end of the movie, I mean, come on, do you apes want to live forever? Holy shit. Holy shit.
Yeah.
Michael Ironside, that whole Michael Ironside, when he is reintroduced, to this day, like, gives me chills. Like, I got a big, stupid grin on my face. I'm alone in the dark. My wife and son are sleeping, and I'm like, yeah.
Yeah, he pulls that off, and I love how they fold that line into the movie because it's used as each chapter in the book starts off with some kind of military history quote.
Yeah.
The book actually starts off with that quote, "Come on, you apes, you want to live forever." And apparently it's from World War I. Apparently it comes from an American soldier who, when the Americans got into the trenches at first, they didn't really realize how fucked up it was.
Yeah.
And were a lot more gung-ho than the Europeans who had been down in the trenches for 3 years and who had been beaten down and experiencing chemical warfare. And so, apparently one of the American guys, tired of waiting in the trench, picks up his rifle and starts to charge and says, "Come on, you apes, do you want to live forever?" And I think that that line can mean two different things at once. It can mean, "Come on, you pussies, are you trying to survive this terrible situation? Do you think you're going to live forever? Why don't we just die right now?"
Yeah.
But the other way that it could be meant is, do you want to go into eternity and be remembered for your valor, like Roger Young? I mean, the person Roger Young was a real person. He's got a song written about him. It was the first song I ever sang to my kid, because when I was in the hospital holding him for the first time, I had just listened to Starship Troopers on audiobook about 18 million times to get through my busy season.
Yeah.
And that song, shines the name Roger Young. I mean, you can be remembered for your valor, or you can just choose to live a safe life forever. I think that's kind of the dual meaning of that.
Well, exactly. It's about the kind of the exceptional nature of taking risks, and how that can actually, even if you die, you died for something you believed in. It's actually, you know what it is? It's the distillation of the fucking speech that Mel Gibson gives in Braveheart.
Yeah.
It's like he takes 5 minutes to do it, and they got it in a sentence.
Right. Yeah. Every pre-battle speech is basically that summed up. Do you want to be safe for the rest of your life and nobody remembers you, or do you want to go out in a blaze of glory and go to fucking Valhalla, and then everybody sings songs about you for the rest of the time? I mean, we still talk about Leonidas and the Spartans. That wasn't a fake thing. That was a thing that happened. Man chose to do that.
Yeah, well, this is something I think about all the time, especially after having a kid, was legacy. What does it mean to live a life? What does it mean to live a life worth a damn? I think about it all the time. And I think about it in context of being a father. And what is my son going to think of me? One day my son will be old enough to have his own opinion of me. I'm not God anymore. I get to be God. I get to be God for 12 years. Yeah, I know. I know, it's freaky when you start thinking about it. I get to be God for 12 years. That's basically what I think the time frame is, right? And then after that, he's going to have his own opinions of the things I do. And I want to make sure that my actions in my life are worthy of his appreciation, of his respect.
Right.
Which is not something I hear from a lot of parents, so I'm just going to pat myself on the back, support my Patreon. No, I'm just joking.
Well, most people don't give a fuck about that kind of thing. Most people don't think 10 feet in front of the next episode of Big Bang Theory or whatever.
It's fucking, dude, it drives me insane. I'm like, we could sit here, we could talk for 5 hours about modernity and the fucking, I don't even know what the right word is. It's like, it's evil. It's deconstructionist, postmodern, evil mess where they're trying to convince you that nothing means anything, and it's the fucking slow decline into nihilism where nobody is happy because I'm not happy. And it's insane.
It is insane, and it's something that our generation chews on like a canker sore, this nihilism. I think that's why simulation theory is such a popular topic of conversation among nerds of our generation, because if this world is a simulation, that gives you the ability and the right and the out to just be a lazy piece of shit whose life means nothing and then die. And it didn't mean anything in the first place. It was just simulation on a 12-year-old girl's computer. So whatever, man. And it's like, you know what? I'm sorry, what are you going to say?
No. Can you finish your thought? Sorry.
I mean, I just feel like the Boy Scout campsite rule applies to all things, including computer simulations, which is to say that if this is a simulation that's on a 12-year-old girl's computer and I'm an entity that's living inside of it, it is my duty to leave this simulation better off than I fucking found it.
Well,
it is
because
not an excuse
exactly.
to twirl down into nihilism.
Well, because your life is what's in front of you. Your life is your experiences. So whether or not you're a computer simulation or not, it really doesn't matter because it's your life.
Right. It's not an excuse to like let your dishes pile up, you fucking lazy piece of shit. And you know, it's just one of the things that attracted me to this book was it was so anti that. It was so
no, it is. It's very anti.
Hop on it, get after it. If you want something, you need to go do it. Have the balls to do it. Have the gumption to stick to it. And that's what Ron Rico did. I mean, one of the big things of the book is how he gets the shakes because he doesn't have his dad's approval.
Mm-hmm.
You know. Which we can split into that now a little bit if you want. I mean, that's one of the biggest books.
Oh, you're talking Mr. Daddy issues over here.
Oh yeah, I mean,
I know. I mean, my father passed away like 10 years ago. Like, and I think about those kind of things all the time going forward in life about being a man. And you think about like, you know, because Rico's in this position with his dad, where his dad had been completely opposed to what he was doing. Right? He was going into the military. He actually kind of joined the military as like a form of rebellion, being a rebellious teenager, you know? Because this is another cool thing I think that's in the book. It's also in the movie, to its credit, is this idea that like not everybody thinks this is good. Not everybody thinks you need to do this. Especially, it becomes kind of a class thing when you're a civilian. It becomes about a money thing.
But what do we see happen in the book?
Oh, in the book it's different. Yes.
Yeah, after the asteroid hits.
You want me to give you the uncharitable interpretation, or do you want?
I would like you to give me straight up what is the uncharitable.
Oh, this is if I were to be uncharitable. If I wanted to say like this is a fascist creed, it's about his dad gets radicalized because his wife dies in Buenos Aires because of the bug attack, and
that's exactly what happens.
Yeah.
And you know, they don't present that as a bad thing, but he also says that he kind of knew deep down inside.
Yes.
That
throws his mom under the bus.
Yeah. Well, you know, he said he knew deep down inside that, you know, he was kind of jealous of Rico. That's why he never approved of it, because he always kind of wanted to join up and do his federal service, but he never did. And then after his wife dies, he snaps and says, you know what? I'm going to go kill some fucking bugs. But also, I'm going to just give into the concept that I wanted to give into when I was younger, which was I want to be a citizen. I want to be part of this. I don't want to just be some schlub who goes out and makes money and becomes another economic unit. I want to be a member of a crew. I want to have my name sent back to that crew when I die so that they can memorialize me on that ship. That makes you part of something.
Well, it makes you part of it. You become part of a tribe. You have this extended family. You're part of a movement. Like what you do matters. If you die, you matter. Like you died for something. You will be remembered. Like kind of we were talking about before, right? This idea of like this maintaining of a legacy, and what does it fucking mean to live a fucking life worth living? What does it mean? Granted, it means a million different things, but in the context of this story, and I think broadly just for everybody, is give a fuck, give a shit.
Correct.
Give a shit about what you're engaging with. And don't be a Paul Verhoeven. But it's only good for killing fucking bugs. But,
exactly. I mean, that's one of the things that drew me into the book, was because there's so much give a shit, and I'm surrounded by so much not give a shit, and I refuse to fucking fall to that.
No, it's so depressing, because you're just like, this is how I acted when I was 17, and I thought I was too cool to care.
Right.
Like, and because I had fucking problems and insecurity, so I decided I didn't care. Like that's how you. And then now people act like this till they're 45. Sorry.
And it's more socially acceptable to act that way till you're 45 than to actually fucking go straight laced and live a normal life and raise a family. All of a sudden, that's toxic. So
that is when I kind of made reference to this before, like this, and this is something that I think Heinlein correctly saw. Heinlein was a smart dude, involved with academics, involved with the intelligentsia, like he was friends with Ayn Rand, like I said. And this has been coming since the 50s. What is happening right now in society has been being pushed in universities and whatnot since the 60s. There's a bunch of the rock star philosophers of the 50s, 60s, and 70s, like Foucault, Derrida, a few other people. I mean, he actually goes all the way back to Sigmund Freud if you really want to get crazy with it.
You mean fucko?
Fucko. All these good people that came out in the 1980s, all of these rock star philosopher people came out in the 1980s to sign a petition that they should be able to fuck 12-year-olds. Yeah. But, yeah, that's where they're coming from.
And you know what? In their world, they should be able to because nothing matters.
Nothing matters, right? Because
Yeah.
they're like, what is maturity? What is choice?
You know what?
What is consent?
What if the 12-year-old consents? You know what I mean? Then then you're the bastard for telling that 12-year-old that she can't fuck me.
Well, and that is what goes on every goddamn day. There's such a huge dissonance between. I mean, we don't need to get into this, but I mean, we can maybe talk about this off podcast. But just like the trans kid thing, I find nothing more insidious than the idea that you're going to chemically neuter a 6-year-old. Like a 6-year-old knows what the fuck is going on. You won't let them choose what they eat for dinner. What are you doing?
And to me, that's fucking pure evil. And the fact that, if I had a normal job, I could lose my fucking job.
For writing that on Facebook.
That, it's like we have crossed the threshold here and to the point where, and this is why I say I think freedom has failed. I think that we need a strong adult in the room now because we've passed that civilizational crest where people are decent enough to rein in themselves. And now we're at a point where it's just like there's no such thing as decency anymore.
I'll be honest with you. I do think we're actually at the crossroads. I think we're at the inflection point. I don't think we have crossed over yet because I think enough people are noticing that they're being gaslit that people are actually starting to react. I mean, maybe not. The reason why you don't hear from them is because they don't have a platform. They don't have. They're kicked off of platforms. I mean, like my humble water filter salesman from Austin, Alex Jones. No, I'm just joking. But he was. Sorry. That's an inside joke.
What happened to your buddy, Sean?
Yeah. No, but like he was a canary in the coal mine in the coal mine because he's just like he made the Overton window shift about what was acceptable online. Suddenly, now you're getting just mainstream conservative people. Suddenly, their opinions are taboo on social media, and now we have this technocracy, these fucking Silicon Valley shadow government that is deciding who gets free speech, who gets to say things. Like it's a bad thing, and I do think the next 10 to 20 years is really going to determine whether or not we go where you're saying. That's my opinion. I do think there are people that are starting to wake up, and they're kind of just like, this is really fucking strange. Like, we can't allow this to be anymore. And I hope there is a sea change. I really do. I mean, I really don't want to go to the place where I need daddy government to fix it for me. I really don't. I'm a right-leaning libertarian. Well, I have right-leaning views. I have left-leaning views depending on the subject. I don't believe in picking a side as a person. You may call me a milquetoast fence sitter. But I have my values. I have my principles, and that's how I vote. And I don't think I'm a bad person. So.
Well, yeah, and we have a choice as a society to move forward into a more chaotic future or a more orderly future, and now that we are looking at a more orderly future as if it is fascism, hey, well, if the other option that I have is a totally chaotic Mad Max warlord type situation where I have to stop the marauders from coming up the hill, which is currently the situation in some parts of this fucking country right now.
I know, man.
I would rather just choose having a strong man who's going to keep shit in line. And that really makes people's jaw hit the fucking floor. You don't believe in democracy and freedom? What are you talking about? And I say, well, you know what? Democracy and freedom is, how you get like a 6-year-old telling his parents that he's going to go through hormone replacement therapy and they don't have any legal right to say no.
Yeah.
So, at some point, an adult has to come in the room. And at some point, a civilization goes so far off the rails that violence and force has to be applied. for everything to go back to order.
Well, I'll tell you what, if these autonomous zones keep popping up, if people keep trying that shit, that is what's going to happen. Even the most liberal, milquetoast, fucking asshole governors of these democratic enclaves that have destroyed their cities that, like, for the past 50 years have created the situation for these things, because it doesn't happen everywhere. This isn't happening everywhere. This is happening in very specific places.
Right.
I have plenty of problems with the police. About how they do their business, and I think they're adversarial. We talked about, go watch our episode about Copland. We talked we talked a little bit about that, but I do think, like, imagine being a police officer in 2020, having to work in one of these cities while the leadership of your city is throwing you under the bus because a couple assholes did something stupid. Like, as if there isn't a couple assholes in any industry, in any workforce, anywhere. Like, granted, I understand the difference. They have a monopoly on force and violence. They need to be kind of held accountable in a way that, like, the average person isn't.
Certainly.
But at the same time, you need to be fucking fair. Like, so this emotional reflexiveness that is not designed to solve anything. Oh, we got to let the voice of the unheard, as they're burning down minority businesses in minority areas where poor old black people are now not going to be able to get their fucking medicine because some asshole wanted to burn down Target and the gas station. Like, it's just...
And you reach a point in your mind where you, like, or at least I did, where it was just like, okay, so we can continue to have more of this, because I'm thinking back to 2015, 2016, when I first started getting into this material, when this shit was happening, the miniature version of this was happening before, oddly enough, right before an election. It was really weird. And it's just like, when you give in to the idea of, like, wouldn't it be nice if somebody just stepped in and fucking did something about this?
Yeah.
All of a sudden you go, oh, wait a second. I think I'm the bad guy. I'm the fascist now. Just because I want fucking law and order in my society.
Well, because I don't think
you're presented with those options.
But I don't think that's fascism. Like, I think if people, like, that is literally the role of the government. I'm a limited government kind of person, right? But I think that if they do have a role, it's to protect your civil liberties and to protect your fucking property from hordes. Like, that's what it was established for. That was the whole paradigm when we first started, when they started making laws, when they started writing the Constitution. That was the whole thing. That's the whole deal. They're not supposed to be making all these, like, social constructionist policies and whatnot. That's not their role. Their role is supposed to be very basic. And then as a democracy, if it was to work out the way it should, people would kind of govern themselves to a certain degree. But that's obviously not what's happening. And there's nothing I can't really defend what's going on right now, because that's not what happened.
And, I've even gotten to the point where I just, I had a personal Facebook. I deleted it. I check in on it every once in a while.
Oh, I saw Yolanda out there. I saw her.
Yeah. I changed the name to be a dickhead to Yolanda Jopkiza, something or other. To make a point about certain things, but nobody wants to hear my fucking points, so I just deleted it. Nor does anybody want to hear my terrible dark humor in these times. But,
Well, I do, so I'm happy to be talking to you, sir.
I'll just send little texts to you whenever I think of something dirty. But, I think there is something to be said for wanting to live in a society of order. And at this point in our society, if you believe that, if you believe in borders, if you believe in defining us and them, if you believe in any kind of sovereignty or any sort of collective future,
but even when you describe it in terms of us and them, that's not necessarily a pejorative. It's like not necessarily a bad thing. You're just saying, like, we are from here, you are from there. Like, we might have different cultures, we might have different ways of doing things.
I'm talking about to the anarchists in the Chaz, these people who are going to be, basically conducting our policy for the next 20 years. They believe that there is no difference. They believe that there is, every human being is just a light bulb to be pulled out and placed in another place, and it just works exactly the same. And a realistic person understands that that's not true. And so, you can very easily be called a Nazi and a fascist for just simply saying, hey, look, I think that there's enough room for everybody to have their own space here. And what happens when lots and lots and lots of disparate groups of people come together is like fucking chaos and power struggle.
Well, it is because of, but I do think this is something that is pushed by social constructionists, which is this bifurcating of everybody. Everybody has to be separated into groups and tribes, and you are supposed to act this way because you're this color. You're supposed to act this way because you're from this class. Where in reality, like when you go out in your day-to-day life and you're just a regular person and you're working a job, I mean, I've worked with people of all colors, religions, creeds, everything. Like, and at the end of the day, we just fucking worked together, and we were friends, and we laughed, and we talked about real shit, and we didn't really concern ourselves, I guess, with like the larger narrative of who we were supposed to be, because that is the day-to-day life of a regular working person, and it's out of touch people, out of touch elitist people that are describing this paradigm that I question sometimes whether or not it exists writ large. I know it exists in certain parts of the country, 100%. Because there are fucking morons that, like I said, it's not happening everywhere. It's happening in very specific places, and I think there are very specific reasons for that. There have been some social policies that have failed. Social experiments that started back in the 1940s that have fucking failed. And we're seeing the fallout from that, and nobody wants to admit that they were failures.
Everybody just wants to say, oh, we need to work harder. We need to be more tolerant.
Yeah, throw more money at it.
Tolerant's a weird word because tolerant is like a word that alcoholics use. You know what I'm saying? Like, if you're tolerant of something, that means you can put up with it. They chose a really bad word. But
they want thought control. They want to check your implicit bias, which is an impossible thing to check for. They want to make sure that you're thinking the right thoughts. It's not enough to say the right thing. It's not enough to do the right thing. Like, in my opinion, somebody could be racist. They could be, right? And
could be.
If they don't act out in the world that way, like, why do I give a shit? Go ahead, be racist in your private life. Like, I don't care. What the fuck does that have to do with but if you're not acting upon it, if you're not taking action on those beliefs or positions or whatever, then it doesn't matter to me. So chasing
it's a very privileged take that you just had right there.
I know, right?
Just like a white man to say, oh, I won't see color. So now
I'm Irish, sir. My people have suffered. No.
What you don't understand is that racism in the modern day is privilege plus
power.
Which means
yes.
A white person is a racist when they're born. They're a racist when they live, and they're a racist when they die.
You've been reading that.
Actually,
that
maybe they're not a racist
book.
when they die because they're finally out of the picture. But that's the definition of racism today.
That's the modern orthodoxy. This is being taught in every level of institutional education. It's even being taught in corporations. There's this woman who's become very famous lately, Robin DiAngelo. She wrote a book. She wrote a book called White Fragility. I actually knew about Robin DiAngelo about 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah, I've known about her for a while.
Yeah, and I've read most of White Fragility, and it is the most racist book I've ever read. She has never interacted with a black person outside of a corporate HR atmosphere. She encourages you to racialize every interaction you have with other people. And you're like, well, then now I'm projecting racist attitudes towards a person, and you're just like, this is actually gonna make somebody act racist. Which is insane. It's like this gaslighting. And I cannot believe her book right now is on the bestseller list. Like, it's #1 in the country right now, which I don't know what that means. I mean, people don't read, so.
And look, hey, I hate to say it, but wouldn't you like a big group of veterans to just all of a sudden rise up and just start hanging people like her?
I mean, no, sir. No, sir. Yolanda, what are you doing? The spirit has come through.
But no, I'm pretty much half serious. It's at a point in civilization where the kids need to have a little discipline, or this is going to go the fuck off the rails. And there's going to be ethnic conflict. There's going to be all kinds of balkanization, and there's going to be people shooting over each other. Basically over the color of their skin. If
these people are allowed to hold court, I agree with you, and I think that's why it's important. In a weird kind of obscure way, having these kind of conversations, right? Like, we're talking about Starship Troopers, but we're talking about how our reality reflects the solutions that Starship Troopers offered. And I think it's important just to have these conversations that are out there and that are comfortable to have them. However, intense they may get. And it's okay sometimes to talk. We might make mistakes. I may say something I disagree with in a couple of years, like it's possible. But I should have the freedom to do so and have the freedom to grow. But how can you do that if you're not allowed to speak to each other? And I think that to me is such a big deal, is to empower people to fucking speak their minds, whether they're right or wrong, and let's have it out in the public court. Let's have it out. I don't think Facebook is good for it. I don't think it's good for it, to be honest with you.
I've come down on the opposite side.
I know you have.
There's no more words anymore. There's no more arguments. It's a matter of, as Du Bois says in the Philosophy and Moral History and Moral Philosophy section, this is a matter of violence now. This is a matter of whose violence is going to stop whose violence.
Well,
and
because
at this point, the only people who are being violently reactionary and pushing with violence is the mob. So they're going to win.
But they're allowed to. I think they're allowed to feel the perception of power. I'm not sure they actually have it, because we're not actually seeing. We got to pay attention to what's going on in Minneapolis. What are they going to do about their police? The abolishment of the police, apparently 12-0. You're like, okay. See ya, Minneapolis. I cannot, you can imagine being on the council in Minneapolis and then watch what happened in the Chaz and then being like, yeah, we should still do this. Which is insane. But
Sean, that's why I say there's no arguments anymore, because the monopoly on violence is supposed to fall to the state. The state isn't doing anything about that. These riots have been going on for 6 or 7 weeks now.
I know. Okay? I agree with you. I think it is disconcerting, the failure of leadership across the board from everybody. I mean, we're going through especially we're going through a pandemic right now, everybody. If you listen to this in the future, we live in COVID-19 time. And can you believe that the media, politicians were all complicit in literally gaslighting the country? When they're telling you can't work, you can't fucking go to a park with your family, you can't go see your dead, dying parent in the hospital, but you're allowed to mass protest with fucking 10,000 people day in and day out. That's the governor's be like, we support this. And then you have public health officials also coming out and saying well, racism is also a public health concern. You're like, oh my God. This, I'm telling you, Dan, that was a red pill for a lot of people. I mean, because now people don't give a fuck. This could be real, and now everybody's like, oh, it's going to be what it's going to be now. You guys fucked it up.
Well, I mean, yeah, I wasn't an anti-masker at all until they started talking about how, if you want to go to a protest, that's okay. And then I started being like, wait a second, this thing isn't killing as many people as they said. And by the way, they can't actually come out with a coherent narrative on what you're supposed to do on this.
Yeah, because they don't.
I think that this is just being used as a propaganda tool.
I think both can be true at the same time.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I do. When I go out in public, sometimes I wear a mask. It depends on where I go.
Yeah.
But you know what? I've always thought, even when I lived in the city and I saw Asian people wearing masks, I thought, during flu season, that's not a fucking half bad idea.
Exactly.
But,
yeah.
So it is what it is. So, but we might be straying a little bit from the source material, but it's so relevant to modern times because the entire story of what happens in Starship Troopers ends up happening because they go through a time like ours.
No, that's what I was saying. This is the solution, a possible solution to this kind of dynamic. And that is why it's relevant to talk about it. We're not just talking about it because we're awesome dudes who have awesome opinions. No, it is actually relevant to what we're talking about. And that's why it struck such a chord when I read it. I was like, holy shit. I was like, this is very much now. This is so much right now. And I don't know if I like the Starship Troopers answer completely. I'm not even sure. That's another thing I was not clear when I read it. I was like, does even HEINLEin, does he love this answer? And I didn't know.
I don't know either, and I think that's not as important to the story as the growth of Johnny Rico. And that's one of the things I noticed about the book is how it is so much from a soldier's perspective. Mm-hmm. That he talks about the war going on, and he talks about these terrible battles that he gets in and stuff. And there's never a part where, you know, how do I describe it? There's never a moment of desperation in the book. There's never a moment of like, oh, we're on the verge of losing this.
Even when they do.
Huh?
I said even when they do. The first attack in Clondathu is a slaughter.
Clondathu. You would think that in a book, and as going back to what we said at the beginning, how there's not a lot of plot in the book, it's mostly character. You would think that a book about a war with bugs from space would have some kind of climax where we're like almost at the verge of losing, and then Rico comes in at the last second and saves humanity. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that would have cheapened everything.
Well, that's because Heinlein is a good writer, and he's like, you know, we win. I don't need to tell you.
Yeah.
And he does it because it's almost more interesting to take that journey with that character without being able to see whether or not it pays off. Because the journey is sometimes more important than the destination.
Right, and that's, I think, one of the important reasons why the book ends on a cliffhanger. It literally almost ends mid-sentence with, you know, Rico, and I want to talk specifically about the last few chapters of the book. Yeah,
of course. Yeah.
They're my favorite. It's my favorite ending, I think, of any book of all time. The last thing that you see is Rico getting ready to shoot out of his pod and go down to another battle on another planet, killing some more bugs. And the book ends right as he's about to make his drop. And right as the drop music starts, the Roger Young song. And, you know, the book ends with the song, with the lyrics, "To the everlasting glory of the infantry." Mm-hmm. And then the rest of that lyric is shines the name Roger Young. And it's like, you don't need to know how the battle's going to go. Because it doesn't matter. The story's over. Rico became the man that he's supposed to be. All the battles that happen after this are just gravy. Well, he has grown into the person that he's supposed to be now.
It's the ultimate, like, kind of fruition of the concept. This idea of legacy, this idea of honor and valor and doing something with yourself and doing something with your life. Right? That's what that song is about. To the everlasting glory. It's like an old Viking tune, basically. And that is like, and it just puts a perfect period on it, and it makes you, and it reminds you. I think this is like Heinlein, being a good writer, is reminding you that it's really not about all this other stuff. The story is about this guy, and his kind of self-actualization. Like, he comes to this point, right?
Right, and he's actually leading the platoon that he was in at the beginning of the story. He's giving a very similar speech to his men that Jelly was giving to them at the beginning of the story. And he says that same line that came down from Rathscheck himself, which was, "I expect your names to shine." And there's that generational thing where it's like that one phrase went from maybe Rathscheck's commanding officer to him, to Jelly, to Rico. And that's something that the commander of the Roughnecks says before they go into battle.
Yeah.
And so, you know, so many things come to culmination in those last few paragraphs. It is amazing how well it's set up. Rico leading the Roughnecks. His dad is also in the Roughnecks now with him, having done a complete 180 and joined the MI. His shakes finally go away. Why did they go away? Because his dad puts his arm on his shoulder and says, "It's all right, son. It's just like a drill." And he finally gets that approval from his dad, and one of the last lines of the book is, "The shakes didn't start back up again." And I think that he's saying the shakes never started back up again. He was over it. He got his dad's approval. He's a grown man now. He knows his role and how to do it, and he's about to go into mission right now.
Yeah, because it's what I call this in real life, because I'm a pretentious, lofty person. I call it the cosmic tap. You want to feel a cosmic tap from your line, from your family, or whoever was your father figure. You want to feel that. It makes you comfortable. It makes you feel like you're doing the right thing. Honestly, what I think one of the problems today is I don't think many people feel that. I don't think many men our age get to feel that. No. I kind of didn't get to feel that because my dad passed away. So when I read that in the book, it was very moving to me. It was like very touching. And
you know, I actually had a moment with my own dad last summer where we were doing poultry together because my parents have actually come out and helped me do a couple chicken jobs.
Nice.
And, you know, there are times on a job where it's hot. You know, I work outside a lot, and we were getting behind or whatever. Upholstery is a real frustrating thing to do because there's so many little steps, and you have to keep everything really clean. And I remember I was probably getting visibly frustrated, and we had a moment that was almost exactly right off the page where I don't think he put his hand on my shoulder, but he might as well have. He just kind of gave me a look, and he said, "It's all right, Danny. We're getting through this." You know, and I can't remember his exact words, but he looked at me and gave me that reassurance. And I remember that feeling washing over me of like, wait, it is okay.
Yeah.
You know, Dad says it's okay.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's such an amazing part of the book, to think that the shakes that he's been talking about from the moment he started talking to the reader. One of the first things he said, in fact, it might be the opening line of the book, is, "I always get the shakes before a drop." Yeah, I always get the shakes before a drop.
Yeah, that's because Heinlein's good, dude. Heinlein's a good writer.
One of the last lines in the book is, "I stopped shaking at once. The shakes didn't start back up again." And then the cherry on the top of all of it, they have just made a big deal about one of the reasons that we have female pilots and female captains.
Yes, yeah.
Not only are they better pilots, but one of the things that energizes an MI trooper when he's shot out of that capsule is the last thing that he hears before he's fired is a woman's voice saying, "Good luck, boys."
Yeah.
And they make a big deal about how the female encouragement, not just the encouragement of the father, but the female encouragement, drives men along to do great things, great risky things.
Of course.
It gives a man that extra little boost. You know, they tell stories about how when the Gauls used to fight and the Celts used to fight against the Romans, that they would bring their women and children to the front lines with them.
Yeah.
To like cheer on the men, to give them that confidence. I mean, how much harder would you fight, Sean, if your wife and kid was right there with you?
Well, that's the, you know, and this is something I've learned over the years, kind of getting over myself and like being a more responsible, productive person, is the idea that like nothing makes you better than that. Nothing makes you better than getting married or being with somebody that like for long term and having a kid. That'll make you want to fucking succeed. That'll make you want to succeed in a big bad way more than anything else.
Yeah.
Because I'm the type of person, I couldn't do it for myself. I needed it. I needed like this external force to come and like kind of like envelop me and like say, okay, now live to your potential. I've always been an underachiever, always been kind of a slacker.
A C-type student.
Yeah. You go, yeah. And as soon as I heard my kid cry, my entire life fucking changed in an instant. Not even shitting you. I felt it in my gut, my soul, whatever you want to call it. Like, I felt it. I
remember holding Theo in the hospital, and I was alone in a room with him for the first time. Caitlin had to do something. I had been up for like 36 hours, so I don't remember what she was going to do. But I was holding Theo, my little baby Bean, for the first time. And two things. First of all, I'm literally singing to him, shines the name, Roger Young. Because it's the only song that I can think of at that moment of intense emotionality. And then the other thing that I'm thinking is, if anybody comes to harm this child, I'm going to fucking rip them limb from limb. And I started to get into this like homicidal feedback loop. And I had to like stop myself and be like, okay, Danny, it's the 2020. You're in a modern hospital. There are not roaming gangs of marauders out there coming to steal your child from you. But there was this primal switch inside of me that I couldn't describe or understand. And one of the things that the ending of the book just, I almost said drives home, but it doesn't drive it home. It just puts it right in front of you, is that primal understanding of a man defending what's most important in the world, and that's his family.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. And in the context of Starship Troopers, it broadens it out, right? Because that's the whole point of, I guess, citizenship in the context of the story. This is like your large...
Correct.
Yeah, exactly. It's your large extended family, and it gives you, like I said before, it gives you skin in the game. You have stakes. You can't fucking care about things. You can't make rational decisions if you don't have stakes in something. And that is a big problem, I guess. You know, going back to just what's going on in the world right now, most people don't have stakes. We are We're a very fortunate society, and people do not appreciate it. And we're so fortunate that people have to like kind of reflexively create problems to feel like they have meaning in life, rather than just enjoy what they have.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you know, I guess I'm just the kind of person who, you know, life provided me with enough problems that I didn't have to fucking do that shit. And I have always been kind of fascinated by like my middle class white friends, because I grew up in the hood.
Yeah.
Okay? I didn't grow up in the worst hood in the world, but I grew up in a multi-ethnic kind of ghetto-y, you know what I mean? I grew up in South Jersey.
Yeah.
In the poorest county in New Jersey. You know, when I moved to New Hampshire and I was all of a sudden swamped with like rich white kids who seemed to all be really sad.
Artie's only halfway.
Hardy's not half white. He's half Italian and half Mexican.
Oh, that's true. Fair enough. Fair enough. Good call.
But you know, I couldn't understand. I couldn't wrap my head around this idea that like everything was provided for you, but you still want to like listen to Marilyn Manson and cut yourself. Like I never got it, and I think it was because I came from a place of adversity. And once I got out of the place of adversity, it was like, yo, this is nice. Let's chill out and like enjoy life a little bit.
That's the exact same experience I had. Like growing up, my parents really like struggled. So I like grew up in a trailer. I was 14 before my parents even owned a house that could comfortably fit all of us. Like I shared a room with my brothers till I was like 14. And then my parents inherited. They didn't really inherit anything. They had to pay through the teeth for my grandfather's business. So we had like this grace period. We lived a good life. We weren't checking prices anymore.
Right.
Weren't wanting for anything anymore. And that lasted about 5 or 6 years. And then the biotech industry completely collapsed. And then we ended up in South Carolina. My parents were like, well, let's buy a house in South Carolina before we can't buy one. And yeah, but so it's like I understand what you mean, because I've always had that same response to people. It's just like, you are the arbiters of your own misery. You really are. You can't like you're and you know what's even the sickest part of it though for me, because I was so insecure as a teenager, was like I wish I felt like you. I wish I felt so bad for myself, or I wish I was just like I wanted to feel that, because I thought that was like being a real person. You know,
right? There's something authentic in that, right?
Yeah.
There's this concept of authenticity. Like I kind of noticed it from, you know, some of my more well-off friends, especially later on in life when we got more mature and conversations started to have a little weight. You know, like there was this sort of aura around the way I grew up to some of these people. Almost as if, you know, they felt that they weren't authentic because they didn't grow up that way. And it's like, look, no. Let me explain something to you. You grew up as the child of a great empire, okay? Your job is to take your parents' empire and expand it. It is not to, like, cower and watch, like, MTV all day and be pissed off because, you know, like, because why? Why are you even pissed off?
No, I completely agree, yeah.
And I think that part of it is what you were talking about before, that post-1950s nihilism creep where nothing has meaning, nothing is important, everything you do is just going to be blown away like dust in the wind, and, you know, Kansas sucks. So it's like there's nothing. But
Kansas does suck, yeah.
I know, dude, that song is from an album called Leftoverture.
Oh, gross.
That's so bad. That got past. So many producers okayed that. But
well, if you're a band that approves that, fuck you.
So, you know, we live in a society that is about as good and nourishing for the soul as the album Leftoverture by Kansas.
Yeah, we live in we're vapid, we're shallow, and we don't actually, and most people, especially most people our age, are ahistorical. They don't know anything that happened before 1992.
They don't know anything. I mean, it is not long for me to get into a conversation. And listen, I'm not the smartest dude in the world, but It does not take me long to get into a conversation with most people before I realize, like, look, this person has no fucking idea what they're talking about.
Oh, that's the beauty. That's just the beauty
of how their thread of their life threads into history. They have no context of history itself. All they know is pop culture, and it's scary.
Oh, doesn't that fucking annoy you when people just like make pop culture references and act like they made a joke? And you're like, go what?
What?
Yeah, Chewbacca. Cool.
Or if you're in a conversation about politics and somebody says, you know, it's just like that movie ...
Oh no, come on, you know what it is. It's Harry Potter.
Unless you're saying it's just like that movie Starship Troopers, I don't want to fucking hear it. I don't want to hear a word you have to say, buddy.
Well, you know what's an interesting thing, going back to the movie, that I like picked up what you said about, like, we were talking about just the paternal relationship and how important that is to Johnny Rico, how important that is to the story at large, how important it could just to be like as a philosophical conundrum or a question or a perspective, like how that feeds into everything that motivates Johnny Rico. The movie does the complete opposite. The movie, Johnny Rico basically becomes the father of the state, and then he becomes the ward of the next generation of Roughnecks. Because when at the end of the movie, all the new Roughnecks look like they're 15. They look like they're little kids, right? Like from the propaganda videos,
right?
That we saw in the beginning of the movie. And so instead of like getting his actual father to accept him, he's gotten Ratchek to accept him. He's gotten like that is the father, the paternal stand-in, because that's what he wants.
Right.
He wants to be that. He doesn't actually care about his father in the movie. It's just a weird. It's actually pretty clever. It's pretty clever, like inversion of the book. Because but you have to have read the book, and you kind of have to really think about it to understand it. Is that okay? Now the government is his dad now. Like that's who he looks to for guidance. That's who he looks to tell him that it's going to be okay.
Or specifically the MI.
Yes, the MI. Yeah. Although he does have a weird deference for what Neil Patrick Harris's character. When who's
Carl.
Carl, that's right. Yeah, the overt Nazi who's like literally in a black SS like officer uniform.
Right.
And, like talking about like, it's just worth the risk. Yeah, of course we fucking knew they were thinking bugs.
Yeah.
You just weren't important enough to know. Right. Execute. Like, and I do think, in fairness to the movie is like the nightmare version of the book. The book just does not posit the nightmare version. I don't think the movie is charitable to the book at all. I do think it recontextualizes things in an unfair way, because the book is more thoughtful, because like you said, it's all surrounded by talking about history. Like he's making philosophical arguments in the book, and he's using history to back him up. He's not just throwing shit out there. And when the movie, while I might like the line delivery and whatnot on a superficial level, like that Michael Ironside speech when they're in high school cuts out half of that speech, and the other half. Oh, more than half. Yeah, exactly. And the other half is actually what makes it important.
Right.
I mean, because basically if you take it as that, you're like, oh, that's super creepy and fascist. But if you actually hear the rationale behind it, you're like, okay, well, I can understand how a society could come to this conclusion.
Much like all far-right politics, at first you're like, oh, that's really creepy and fascist, and then you actually talk to somebody who's halfway intelligent about it, and you're like, well, it doesn't have a good I
No, I mean, but it's true, though. Because I think the reality of life is just like not one side of an equation has the answer to what you're looking for. I do think it's about like forward thinking. I think it's about smart people that are willing to engage with ideas, however intense you may feel they are in the moment. Like you got to understand somebody's argument before you can disagree with it.
Right.
So even if it's just in an academic sense, like you got to listen to other people. You have to listen to people. And we have completely lost that. And that's one of the interesting things about the book. That is, it kind of posits that as something that happened,
Well, one thing I want to talk about is how Denise Richards is the secret MVP of this movie.
You know, this if she was ever good in a movie, it's Starship Troopers.
Oh, dude, I'm glad you agree with me because listen, Carmencita, the character of Carmencita in the book, she's only in it for a few paragraphs at the beginning.
Literally, talk about her hair.
Yeah, he talks about her a little bit while he's out, and then he finally meets her again when they're both enlisted, and she's got a shaved head, and she's a pilot now and everything. But the way that Denise Richards plays her, either Denise Richards just is naturally exactly like her character, or somebody gave her the character description from the book and said, look, play this character, like, be really cool to all the guys and just kind of like keep them at an arm's distance. But when it comes to the piloting, get really excited and show your emotion. Yeah. Because you see the way she treats all the guys in the movie, just like the way she's described in the book. She's a beautiful, rich girl. She's got all kinds of suitors, and she treats them all equally happily, but kind of, she gives them a big smile at arm's length. That's Carmencita. Yeah. But when it comes to piloting, this girl is fucking passionate. Yeah. And one of the best scenes of the movie is when Denise Richards is piloting the shuttle with her friend next to her, and she's got this huge smile on her face. Yeah. And she's just so excited. And her friend is like, why are you so excited? And she banks, and you see the Roger Young, and she goes, I get to fly that today. And I have to give Denise Richards like a lot of credit. Like, she really did some good acting with Carmencita in this movie. I think for the 90210 episode that the movie is.
I think exactly. I think it is the casting. I think that movie is incredibly specifically cast. And I think this is sometimes this is where Verhoeven failed in Showgirls, where he succeeds in, I don't know, I won't, that's the last thing I'll say about Showgirls, but he succeeds with Starship Troopers, because I don't think those actors really were keyed into what he was doing, and because he didn't, right. I don't think he wanted them to. He wants them to be earnest. He wants them to be young. He wants them to be into it. He does not want them to know that they're making a satire, because if you know and you start winking, then it fucking doesn't work.
Yes.
So you have to get people that are kind of, for lack of a better word, like mediocre, but serviceable. Like, right. But they have a very specific look where it's like, that looks good on a fucking poster. Casper Van Dien is the fucking Nazi goddamn poster child that you would see on a goddamn poster. Actually, I think I found like somebody made like a fake propaganda poster with his face, and it's just Casper. Like, I want you to kill the bug.
That's class, because he has that like square jaw, yeah, and just the soldier, like the clean cut soldier's look. And yeah, Denise Richards is just like, Denise Richards is an unearthly beautiful person. Yeah. And you know when she smiles, she does have a radiance, and just perfect casting for Carmencita. And you're right, I don't think that Denise Richards as a person has the depth to take the writing from this book and go, I'm going to let that inform my character. I just think she oozes that same kind of energy that character oozes. Yeah. And, they probably directed her to, like, kind of what I just said, be cool to the guys, but then when you're piloting, have a big smile on your face. And she went with it.
That's what I mean about just being earnest. Like, acting like it, like, just try to be in the moment. Try to be earnest about it. Like, try to, like, act like you care. Like, you're a flirt. Like, that's your direction to Denise Richards and Starship Troopers. You're a flirt. You're a flirt.
Yeah, she just pulls it off because she's a beautiful woman who's
exactly, because
she's used to keeping beautiful men at an arm's distance, and so you just let her roll.
Beautiful men, creepy men, it doesn't matter. We're all there. We're all there trying to talk to Denise Richards at one point in our lives, and they all had to be like, well, if it was a nice girl, she would be like, a nice girl. She would be like, she would let me down easy. She wouldn't treat me like I was a monster because I approached her.
Well, and I think that's the character of Carmencita.
Yes, 100%.
The book is she, she'll smile at you and break your heart, and then you'll walk away going, she was really nice.
Yeah. She's like, can't hate her. Can't hate her.
And, there's so much teenage pathos in the movie. Like, it's interesting because for so much shit that they cut out of the book to fit into the movie, they also fit in, like, a football game and, like, a high school dance. And, like, there must be 35 minutes of, like, teen movie shit in Starship Troopers.
Actually, there is. I used to own the double disc special collector's edition whenever it came out, and of course I have it on. Of course I have it on 4K now, everybody. Of course, 'cause I'm a psycho. But anyways, no, there actually is about 45 minutes of deleted scenes, and it's all like the romance stuff. It's all like it's very like you think the movie is 90210. The deleted scenes are like the melodrama that they cut out.
And it's like, let's think about some of the shit that they cut out from the book. They cut the skinnies, which are an entire race of aliens that help us fight the bugs.
Yeah.
And not only they help us fight the bugs after we fight a war with them to get them on our side.
Yeah.
Entire subplot with a really cool Protoss type alien species completely cut out. They cut out so much. They cut out his father coming back and being the MI. They cut out all these characters that they condensed down. And like Carl in the movie is like 3 different characters from the book. So is Rathscheck. And
which
it just seems like
I do understand that. I mean, we gotta, to be fair, like you're making a movie. It is a different thing. Actually, one of my favorite adaptations ever is the Lord of the Rings movies, right? That's a capital A adaptation. Like they are great on their own, and they capture the spirit of what I think was intended in those books. Starship Troopers, I think, this is why fans of the book hate this fucking movie. They hate it because it literally inverts the purpose of the book.
But I get that, and I kind of take them as 2 halves of the same whole. Where, in order to truly appreciate the universe of Starship Troopers, you can't just read the book. You have to watch the Verhoeven movie because it kind of fleshes it out a little bit in kind of an inverted way, like you say. But at the same time, it's hard to read the book after watching the movie and not envision everything in the book. The characters, the actors, like the starships, everything right from the movie.
Well,
I think they work well together.
Actually, honestly, I do too, because I think they are like 2 sides of the same coin. And I do think that it's having a conversation with the book that most people don't pick up on. Because like I said, it's the nightmare version of the book. Yeah. It's because the movie is, while it is, like you said, it's like the coolest version of fascism you've ever seen. Like this is triumph of the will writ large. And it is. And that was what they wanted to do, and they did it. And it's up to you as the viewer. I guess they were trusting people to be kind of discerning enough to maybe pick it up, that like they're kind of winking at you, which I don't, as an adult watching this, like how can you not see them winking at you? Like they're winking at you all the time.
All the time. In every scene. And,
would you like to know more? Like, it's just like, everything is like, there are darker moments though where they're implying much darker things. I think that Mormon outpost that gets taken over, I think that is actually like a really dark moment in the movie that is often glossed over because it's put in like a newsreel. Is that like, did the bugs kill them or did the Federation kill them? Because they go at great lengths to establish that they didn't listen to the Federation and they just kind of went out there. And the only thing that's in the news footage is 1 bug leg. This is maybe me reading into it too much. I don't know.
That's a really good read. I never really thought about it like that before. And you had mentioned that concept earlier, and I kind of dismissed it. But the way you put it now, it's true. It could be a subplot of the movie that was very subtly weaved in there, that the Federation actually did a what they call on the internet now a gay op. Which is,
okay. If you internet just like I do, then all right.
I mean, that's not my term. I didn't come up with that.
Neither did I, but I've seen it around.
That's a term that is come up with to describe an act that the government perpetuated, that kind of pushed forward. So it's basically the same thing as saying that George Bush was in on 9/11.
Yeah, it's a false flag.
It's a false flag. That's the not offensive way to say it.
Yeah.
I was trying to think of the not offensive way to say
it. But you were thinking of the elite internet hacker way to say it. It's like, man, you're pulling some fucking gay out, and you find it in all these like weird little subcultures that are all over the internet that I lurk on sometimes because I find them entertaining.
I mean, when I take in the spectrum of like news and politics, I take it in from the far left antifas
Yeah, me too.
to the far right Nazis, and I take it all in the middle. I read the Google News feed I want to know exactly what the mainstream. I want to know what the line is. I want to know what the narrative is. So I read the Google News feed, and then I also listen to. I don't speak German, and then I also listen to the kill stream and shit.
Dude, me and you, dude, Dan. I'm telling you, we gotta fucking talk. We'll talk off podcast, but yes, I basically do the same thing.
Yeah, I try to take it all in.
The fact that you know what the kill stream is pretty is pretty impressive to me.
Well, the kill stream is not even the most extreme on that side that I.
No, it's not. It's really it's the light. It's the TYT of that side of the internet.
Yeah, it is the light. I wouldn't want people on your podcast to know that I listen to Red Ice Radio every once in a while.
Oh, but dude, I listened to Red Ice. You know how I found Red Ice actually? You know, it's crazy. I went through a period of time where I was investigating flat earthers. That's how I found Red Ice.
They're funny over there. But the point that I'm getting at here is that I didn't actually read it that way, but now that you kind of described it, that scene is kind of set up to make it look like a
because you got to think about it in the context. Think about it in the context that everything you're watching is propaganda. It's all propaganda for the Federation. The entire movie is a piece of Federation propaganda. And then that's when I watched it this last time, I was like, holy shit. I was like, the whole movie is propaganda. None of this is real. This is the fucking movie. Yeah. Like in-universe movie. This is an in-universe movie. And I was like, holy shit. I was like, maybe, I think you're kind of an asshole, Verhoeven, but fuck, I think I give credit to the writer. I don't give credit to Verhoeven. Verhoeven, I give credit for his style and his ability to put together a movie, okay? But Verhoeven is as good as the script.
Yeah, and he almost seems to misunderstand his own material, especially with that line that he says about it's only good for killing fucking bugs. Which I keep going back to that.
Well, because that's like
that thing to say.
That fucking that liberal guilt bullshit where he just cannot give anything. He just has to be like, he's just got to be like, oh no, of course it's crazy. It's like, dude, have the intellectual argument if you're gonna come out and say this shit. It's funny if you ever get a chance to. The audio commentary with Verhoeven and Ed Neumeyer is pretty interesting because Ed Neumeyer has this broader historical perspective, and Verhoeven does not.
Does not, yeah. Well, I mean, when you look over Verhoeven's filmography, which I did before going into this, listen, man, he did RoboCop and a couple other things. That's what I'm going to say about Paul Verhoeven.
I mean, okay, Flesh and Blood. Have you ever seen Flesh and Blood?
Never seen it.
It's actually not bad. Rutger Hauer, if you're a Rutger Hauer fan. RoboCop, amazing, masterpiece.
Love it.
One of my all-time favorite, probably in my top 10 movies ever. Total Recall.
Hey, the IZA wrote a song about Total Recall called "Get Your Ass to Mars."
Yes, they did. Another great Michael Ironside performance where he's like a corporate man.
Yeah, it is Michael Ironside. Yeah.
He's the one that's sleeping with Sharon Stone.
Right.
Yeah. Fucking Michael Ironside, dude. He's awesome.
Can we talk about him for a second? Because I love Michael Ironside. Dude.
Oh, we gotta talk. We cannot have a whole podcast about Starship Troopers and not talk about Michael Ironside. Holy shit. Perfect casting. Whether he was Dubois or he was Ratchek, it doesn't matter. That would have been perfect either way. So getting them to put them together actually made some sense.
And it's interesting. Sometimes he can't hide his Canadian accent. He says a line in this movie. I forget which one it was, but I perked up and I was like, he had a real kind of guy kind of thing going on there. And I looked it up and he's a Canadian, but that dude just conveys such presence. Michael Ironside is just fucking brilliant. Dude, my favorite performance from him is Scanners, which one day we gotta do. But I mean, just the way that he can look at another character and not say anything and just kind of give him a look, and he can convey so much with just a look. He's one of my favorites. I won't want to say one of my favorite actors, but he's one of my favorite sort of B.
He's a character actor.
He's a character actor. Yeah.
He's a great character actor, and anytime he shows up in any movie, it doesn't kind of matter what the role is. You're like, yeah, Michael Ironside.
And he's also one of those actors that if you're not, I'm certainly only half as into cinema as you are. That's how we end up going like, hey, have you seen this movie? And I'm like, no, I haven't seen that one. And we do that for like half of our streams. But he's one of those actors that everybody knows, but nobody knows his name.
Yeah.
Because they're just like, oh, he's that guy from that thing. And
he was the bad guy in Highlander too.
Yeah, and that kind of shit, yeah. And
he was in the next Karate Kid. He was the bad instructor.
All right, maybe we're diving a little too deep, but
he was.
No, I mean, he does the same thing in this film as he does in Scanners, which is to just be a presence, an intimidating presence, even when he's a teacher.
But it works in a paternal way as well. Like, so when that idea that because Johnny Rico's father is gone, kind of Ratchet kind of becomes his father at a certain point in the movie, and but he has a sternness, but he also has access to like this warmth. Like it's like this brutal truth dad. He's just like, I'm gonna lay it out for you, the reality, and I respect you enough to tell you.
Like the scene at the high school dance when Rico comes to him.
Yes, exactly.
Back and forth. What should I do? And I think he expects Rathcheck to say, hey, you need to join up and join the MI. But instead he says, you know what, Rico, follow your heart. Do what you want to do.
And he puts his arm on his shoulder.
Just like the last scene of the book. Yeah, wow, I didn't even think about that.
He's like, Johnny, follow your heart.
Yeah, you're right. Rathcheck does take the role of Johnny's father in the movie because obviously Johnny's father dies in Buenos Aires.
Whoa, what's that? Getting dark out.
That's like it's another one of those scenes that's just like it's kind of funny. You know what I mean?
No, it is kind of funny. I mean, and then it cuts out, and it's just like within 40 seconds, there's a newsreel. Buenos Aires in flames.
Yeah, and there's like a dog. Like, have you noticed that like in the wreckage, there's like blatantly a dog, and it pans up from the dog to the guy. There's
actually a deleted scene where little kids are playing in the wreckage. And that's where that comes from, yeah.
There's so much in the movie that just makes me smile because you're right. It's like a really funny movie.
It really is. No, it's deeply funny. Like
one of the things I kept looking for in the book but never happened. Sort of parallels to it happened, but the part in boot camp where the guy's like, "How can?" it's actually Ace. He says, "How? What's it matter if we're fighting a war with nukes?" If you can just press a button, and put your hand on that wall. And then, and what's the name of the actor who plays Zim? Do you know his name?
Yeah, Clancy Brown.
Yeah, same guy as the guard from Shawshank.
Yes, another one of these great fucking character actors that it just shows up and is perfect in everything.
Yeah, and. Zim just like crushes it. That whole boot camp sequence is so brutal, and like the line medic, which for the first few times that it's used, is a funny line. Zim keeps hollering it when he beats up somebody or he throws a knife into somebody's hand. But then when Johnny is in charge of his first group, the guy gets his head blown off because Johnny has him take his helmet off, and then Johnny repeats the line medic, but it's no longer funny. Things are fucked up now, and it's like that the movie kind of balances like the levity with the heaviness pretty well.
No, and this is I think like why you cannot completely dismiss Verhoeven's skill, right? He does know how to make that movie in the same way he knew how to make RoboCop. Because they're very similar movies in tone, and I think RoboCop is more overtly funny. Like it's more obvious where the jokes are in RoboCop, but in Starship Troopers, he's not really telling you where you're supposed to laugh, and I don't think people really get some of it. And I do think it's that ahistorical perspective. I do think it's just immaturity on people. They can't I don't know. How can you not laugh at some of the shit in this movie? And how can it not have been intentional? Because it's so goofy. Yeah, in the best way, in the best sense. Like it's really goofy.
It's almost like the book. What the book really deserves is like a 15-part, like back in the day, you would have said a 15-part BBC special, but now these days you'd say a 15-part Netflix series.
Yeah, no, I could
with,
see
10
hours
hour-long episodes.
Yeah,
exactly, and character development and digging into all the things in the book.
And give me those fucking power suits.
Oh, we haven't even gotten to the power suits yet. The book deserves that treatment, but also it's really great the way they did the movie because, like you said, it's an inversion of the book, but it's so fun and it adds so much to the color of the book somehow.
Well, because I do think they're having a conversation with each other, and I think having recently listened to the book and watched the movie, I do think they actually enrich each other in a very weird way.
I think you're right. I think
the movie holds the book to account, and I think the book is also kind of fighting against the message of the movie.
Yeah.
In a way that's intellectually I find stimulating. I was like, oh, this is actually really cool because you're getting the same conceptual idea, but from two completely different perspectives, and you're seeing how these two different perspectives will execute on the same thing, and then who is right and who is wrong, kind of, right?
Yeah, and to me, I've always kind of, obviously I got into the movie first, but they've always complemented each other, and as I said, as I've read and listened to the book, I can't help but imagine all the characters as who they are in the movie, and so many of the memes and so many of the pop culture references to Starship Troopers aren't even in the book, so they do kind of, like you said, act as a brother and sister companion piece to one another. I know, I think you said that about RoboCop, but
somebody actually brought up a good point. I was reading something and somebody said was the movie disinfo for people to not read the book? Because people will make an assumption. Because critics at the time in 1997 made an assumption of he made a fascist movie,
right?
And Verhoeven was like, no shit. That was his response to them. He was just like, yes.
Yeah.
But that would turn a lot of people off to the source material, because we have people that need to feel virtue in every single thing they consume. You can't buy your morality has to be tied to a movie ticket you buy in the modern era.
Right. If I'm not reading my child a book about anti-racism, I'm turning them to a Nazi.
Dude, go to Target. You're gonna see some crazy children's books. Fucking hi, my name is Elizabeth Warren. That was a book made for 5-year-olds.
I actually already have the craziest children's book right here.
There you go.
And I'm going to read it to Theo as soon as he's old enough.
Dude, my kid is 3, and we're reading Dune right now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he doesn't know what the fuck is going on, but he gets to hear it, and then we get to create a bond and experience of Dad reads to me. So that's why I do it. We listen to some intense fucking classical music while we're reading it.
Nice.
We have one of those Echo Dots in his room, and which I know. Yeah, they're watching us. But it's been a fun experience to do that. But I cannot wait to read him Starship Troopers in a couple of years. Though I'll give him a couple of years of Starship Troopers.
I was thinking about what the appropriate age for Starship Troopers is, and I'm like, it's a little bit older because there's so many concepts and big.
Well, but you can hook them in with the cool shit. They get hooked in with the coolness, and then later in life you get to go discover it on your own and this cool thing. But as a dad, it's so exciting to me. I'm like, oh, all the things I'm going to show you, and I kind of try to hold myself back because I'm like, well, I don't want to be overbearing. I don't want to be like, yo, dude, we gotta watch Terminator 2. We gotta watch it.
Well, yeah, but when I get excited thinking about reading Theo, The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit.
Oh, I
get excited about, I'm excited about reading him The Bridge of Khazad-dûm, where, Gandalf, when I first read that and I saw Gandalf go up against the Balrog, it was just my imagination. But what if I get to I can't wait to act that scene out for my kid.
Yeah, I know.
You know what I mean? And then at the same time, I think, what if he just thinks it's kind of queer?
Well, that's why you got to get him at what I would say the perfect age for Lord of the Rings, and it'll be hard to wait, but it would be 7.
Yeah.
7. Right there.
The Hobbit.
They can
Hobbit.
Yeah, they can
with Lord of the Rings later.
they can understand concept of friendship and loyalty a little bit at that age, and because that's kind of what it's all about, and like, and then let their imagination take them where it takes them with that book, with those books. That would be so cool. Like seriously, as a dad, the most exciting thing for me is to read my kid fucking books that I liked when I was like a teenager.
Yeah.
And now I'm an adult. I'm like, yeah. I mean, Dune is actually a first read for both of us, so it's very exciting. He's loving all this religious, political talk. It's like I like Dune. I've been enjoying Dune. I'm almost done with it. But a lot of that book is like people sitting around tables talking about politics and religion.
Yeah. I've never read Dune. Let me tell you something about Dune. I know nothing about Dune.
Mm-hmm.
I've never seen any of the movies. I've never read any of the
Neither
books.
have I. Neither have I. Yeah.
And I kind of want to keep it that way. I don't know why. It seems like it would be right up my alley, but I feel like at this point I should probably just never read or see Dune.
I will say that based on what I know about adult Dan, I think you might not hate Dune. The first Dune, at least. You might not hate it.
One day when I have more time and there's less
it's basically like fucking Lord of the Rings, or not Lord of the Rings, fucking Game of Thrones before Game of Thrones, and It's more of like a science fiction version of that. Like honestly, that it's all about political intrigue and the ins and outs and who's stabbing who's back and what are beliefs and where does religion come from and how do we control societies through like religious aspiration and if we can get somebody to believe they're a savior. So there's some interesting stuff in there for sure.
Right.
And it does have that 1950s, 60s science fiction thing where they're like, let's talk about what a thopter is for 20 pages. Which is their helicopter.
Well, that's one of the things that I liked about Starship Troopers is that it really appealed to like my nerdiness where it would say, okay, we're going to take an entire chapter and we're just going to talk about the drop procedure.
Yes.
Or we're going to take an entire chapter and we're just going to talk about power armor, which we haven't gotten to yet.
Well, I think in the book, though, it serves a purpose, though, because you're trying to get in the head of an infantryman. Like, you want to have that experience.
And he uses the starting point of the drop procedure or the power armor or whatever he's talking about, whatever technology he's getting at. He's using that as a focal point for the rest of the war and the rest of his experience, you know? And the part where he's talking about power armor actually plays into a larger story of when he gets in trouble because his power, I forget what it is, his power armor fails and I forget what it is, but it in the film he gets lashed for taking off the guy's helmet, but in the book it's regarding something to do with power armor. Can't remember.
No, but it's not him though; it's somebody else.
Yeah, but they're under his command.
Yes, they're under his command, and they have to go under corporal punishment. Well, actually, they don't have to. I think it's actually a choice because that is an important thing that's seeded through the book. That everything is kind of like you need to consent to this. You need to consent.
Yeah, there's never.
And it's like, it's like if you want to stay in the military, you need to do this, but you don't have to. You can leave.
Yeah, to the point where even if you're in your power armor, getting ready to get into your drop capsule and make the drop, if you just all of a sudden say, "Hey, can't do it, Sergeant," you're gone. You're out, and nobody's going to say anything mean to you. Nobody's going to put you down. They just say, "All right, man, go home." Just drop your gear on the way out.
It's one of the more interesting aspects of the book, honestly, like in the society that is created, because it is kind of this weird, which plays into the purpose of it. It's a no pressure situation. They don't want you to feel pressure. They want you to choose to do this. Do it because you care.
Right.
Because you give a shit.
If you're making a drop on a distant planet that you've never been to before, and there are 100,000 arachnid soldiers beneath you, there can't be any question that you're there for the right reasons. You can't be there for your college education. You can't be there for the paycheck. You can't be there for the benefits. You have to be there because you want to be there.
And kill the bugs.
Exactly. And, the citizenship thing is certainly, that's a big carrot on the stick. But at the end of the day, for the individual soldier, they want you to be there to take orders and kill bugs. Yeah, well, in that specific war.
Yeah, because they want you to take pride in that. Because in the book, the way they frame it in the book is like literally extinction is on the line.
Right.
And like, why wouldn't you want to stop extinction from happening? That's kind of the way they frame it in the book. Like, why wouldn't you want to do this? Like, why wouldn't you want to stop the end of humanity? Because if we don't do this, if we don't step up, it's over.
And you would pose that question to the noodle-necked hipster of 2020, and he'd say, we wouldn't do it because it's just not right, man. It's because there's violence involved, or this is a computer simulation, or it just doesn't matter. And it's like, that entire concept weeds all those people out of the MI, because if you don't want to get into that capsule and drop, you don't have to.
You don't have to. Exactly. It's all about purpose. It's just like everything good that happens to you in life. Like he says, like, anything given is like kind of a falsity. It's not worth anything. You have to get it. You have to earn it. You have to want it for it to mean anything, for it to hold any weight in not only your life, but I think in a broad sense for the example that you set.
Well, I mean, because the things you do are real to other people too. Like
exactly,
the best example that he does in the book is during the history and moral philosophy bit. He walks up to Rico, Dubois does, and he says, knowing that Rico got third place in the marathon or the race or whatever it was, he pins a piece of paper on Rico's chest that says first place. And he says, there, you're the winner of that race. You got first place. Are you happy? And Rico's like, everybody knows that I got third place. Of course I'm not happy. And he's using that to point out the fact that because you didn't earn it, it's not real. And the people around you don't perceive it as real. They all know that it's fake too.
Yeah.
You cannot actually gain any satisfaction from that.
Yeah.
And I think that that's one of the reasons that people in our generation have no sense of satisfaction, because they think everything is fake, and because everything's just been given to them.
Well, because everything has been fake. Like what is a participation? You know the word.
Participation trophy?
Participation trophy. Like, what is that, right? Like, it's the same. And this is what Heinlein is describing about why the society developed the way it did. Because of things like that. Like, it kind of always goes back to this idea of actually accomplishing things and actually caring. Like I said about 45 minutes ago, give a shit. When you don't give a shit, then it doesn't matter. And then you don't get to tell people why they should care.
Right. I mean, it's a very modern belief to think that the outcome is going to be the same no matter what you put into something. Because every time you walk into the store, the Snickers bar is exactly the same way every single time, right? Doesn't matter. Everything's, prepackaged and made for you. And in a world where everything's made for you, nothing matters. So, like, the boomers do the participation trophy meme to crack on our generation. But, dude, when I was in T-ball, we did get fucking participation trophy. Every kid that walked out on that field and knocked the ball off a tee
got a trophy, yeah.
Got a little trophy. And that's fucking bullshit. I mean, that sets up an entire society of people that says, you know what? No matter what I do, the outcome is going to be the same.
I do not have to achieve. I don't need to work hard.
Right.
I don't need to better myself. Yeah.
And it's gone from T-ball to now you give it to the first graders and the second graders, and then all of a sudden, you haven't actually been in a competitive environment until you're in high school, or actually they just wipe the competitive environment off the map to begin with, because
it's so offensive, sir.
Well, the only way to make people equal is to get rid of competition. The only way to level the playing field is to make sure that everybody wins.
Oh, that's
Unfortunately, in nature, that's not the case. There is no all-around winner in nature. There's one winner. Okay?
Well, because even say if the strong hand of the state or the government decided, we're not going to have winners and losers, people still would. In their minds, people still would.
Correct.
We're always gonna know bullshit. We're always gonna know when somebody is better than us or not as good as us. Like everybody puts everything on a hierarchical structure. We all do this in our lives.
We all read Harrison Bergeron when we were in middle school. And that is literally the only way to produce equality in the world, is to handicap people who are more capable. You can't make people who are less capable more capable. You can to a certain point, but at a certain point they reach the maximum of their ability. And the only way to make everybody truly equal is to take everybody's ability and bring it down to a baseline.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's one of the things that, you know, they talk about this kind of in the book, and that, you know, actually I think she mentions it in the movie more than the book. It's when the scientist's teacher is talking about how the bugs are actually superior to us in their evolution.
I actually have a note about that, yeah.
Because they, you know, they actually have a sort of militaristic society right out of the egg. They don't have to be trained. They don't have to have brains. They don't have ego. They don't know fear. They just conquer shit.
It's singular purpose mentality.
Right. And, you know, that's not to say that I think that humans should operate with the same thing. In fact, Heinlein has a very famous quote about how human beings should not be specialized because specialization is for bugs. But what the teacher's pointing out is that in this specific scenario, the bugs are more well equipped to handle the scenario than the humans are.
Yes.
Humans actually have to adapt to the bug mentality of doing things, because if they don't, they'll just be wiped out by it.
I think the quote from the movie is, well, I paraphrase it. The beetle that is dissected is referred to as the perfect member of society due to its brainless nature. It is not critical of its actions or what is asked to do. It just does.
Right, and so you enter into this like very human ideal of the individual, which, by the way, isn't even a human ideal. That's like it's essentially a Western ideal. The atomized individual who thinks and feels on his own. Well, you know, societies that are full of individuals that think and feel on their own cannot act in concert. And the only way that you can defend yourself against an enemy is to act in concert. So if you have a society full of people who are going towards their own ends, they don't give a fuck about anybody else, they don't feel any familiar connection to family or friends or a society or a country or a cause, they're just ripe to get steamrolled by another civilization that does. And in Starship Troopers, it makes a very obvious sort of, fable, because the bugs are not people. But on this planet, we face the same dynamic against other human tribes. And to think that we are outside of that wheel of history, as Dubois says in the book, is wishful thinking at its best.
What do you think about and I think that this is kind of what I picked up on when reading the book, and also the movie in a weird way, was that the bugs are communists.
Sure.
Like we're coming right after World War II. The amount of Russian people that died to win World War II is pretty staggering. Because Stalin did not look at he was like, I don't care, fucking go. I mean, because Stalin does not look at people as people; they were numbers. And he was going to do whatever it took to get it done. And maybe I guess the soldiers had bought into that. I mean, because that was 20, 30 million people, a lot of people. And
when you're controlling the food supply, it's very easy to manipulate people.
Yes, that's what I mean. Yeah. Well, exactly. It's a completely controlled society from every facet, and they had been under oppression from their own government for 20 years at that point. So,
well, I mean,
conditioned. They had been conditioned.
The bugs are a communist society, but they
it's
an unfair parallel to draw, because the bugs have a hive mind, whereas human beings have individual minds.
Do they have a hive mind in the book?
Yes, they talk about the brain
cast. Oh, they do.
Yes,
the brain cast. You're right.
And how at the end it's Operation Royalty, where they're going down the holes not to kill bugs, but to capture queens and brains. And that's actually how the movie ends, too.
That's how the movie ends.
Brain bug. But, I mean, you could say that the bugs are communist, but it is kind of an unfair parallel to draw, because they actually have a completely different society mentally than we do. I mean, none of the workers or soldiers actually think for themselves. So communism, could kind of be an acceptable way to live in that type of society. Whereas in human society, because of our individual natures, communism's a lot harder to pull off, and kind of usually historically has ended in some really terrible situations.
Yeah, ended poorly. Good, because it's about Well, it's about the state just kind of taking large control over large swaths of your life, and you have to kind of accept that. And if you don't accept that, and then there was, obviously more authoritarian, fascistic overtures to what happened in Russia. But I don't know. I just thought, because it seemed like something that was this preoccupation in the book about. I think the book does, while it is kind of calling for this more collective mindset, I do feel like it was hammering in on this idea of individual responsibility. That's Johnny Rico's journey. Is he comes to terms with the idea of wanting to do this. And I guess you could maybe make the argument that that's the process of brainwashing. That's obviously what the movie took from it, right? But I think it's just more of this kind of libertarian perspective of individual responsibility and answering the call. Answering the call. Your society needs you. Your people need you. Go.
Well, I mean, Rico is completely listless and rudderless at the beginning of the book. In fact, when he goes to fill out his forms to join the MI, he just cobbles it, writes in a bunch of random shit for the different sectors that he'd like to join in the Federation of the Mobile Infantry.
Yeah, he's kind of like a spoiled asshole, and he's just doing this to rebel against his dad.
He ends up in the Mobile Infantry because he literally has no other skills or talents. He's not even good with dogs. He puts in he wants to be in the Neo Dog battalions or whatever, and the guy asks him did you sneak your dog in when your mom wouldn't let you have him as a kid? And Rico's like, no, what are you talking about? He said, where's your dog right now? I don't have a dog. Okay, so you're clearly not a dog person, so we're not going to make, and you weren't any of these other 30 things that you had on your list, so you're just a fucking meat sack, so we're going to stick you in the MI. But even though he gets stuck in the MI as a grunt, Rico uses that situation to find purpose. Mm-hmm. And his purpose actually is to be a leader. And so it's whether it was brainwashing or not doesn't even matter. This man reached his potential. Doesn't matter. Is it better for a man to be brainwashed and reach his potential, or for a man to live as a free, atomized individual and be knee-high in porn and Doritos bags all the time? What's a better man, the brainwashed man who's an MI soldier, or the free man who's 550 pounds and can't even get an erection to jerk off to the porn collection he has? You tell me.
Well, damn, that might be an uncharitable position. I don't know if it's excellence or failure quite to that extreme. I do think that's a really interesting question. I do think it's a philosophical question. It's what is freedom and what is the value of it and how does it actually operate in your life? But I do think it comes down to you. I think it comes down to how do you utilize freedom? There are plenty of free people that make good decisions and do good things.
Yeah.
There are a lot of people that don't, understandably. I understand that. I would not argue against that. That's the dual-edged sword of freedom. That's the dichotomy there. But yes, I understand what you mean. I guess I'd rather be Johnny Rico.
Hell yeah.
Well, because I think a lot of people, when you have a little life experience, when you do a few things, you start understanding the concept of purpose. Hard work, the value of hard work, the value of trying, the value of caring. And a lot of people just don't have that. As much as I love the internet, it has really ruined an entire generation of people that we're not equipped to handle it. We just weren't equipped as a species, literally not equipped to handle what the internet was giving us. And now we're letting little fucking petty tyrants in Silicon Valley control the internet. My poor humble water filter salesman from Austin, Texas. This guy, he's just trying to sell his bone broth.
He sells bone broth.
He's just trying to sell his energy pills. Whatever. Let the man be an entrepreneur. And if he wants to say some shit, no, I'm just joking. I'm sorry. I had known about Alex Jones since I was 17 years old. So
Alex
he's
Jones is a ridiculously entertaining individual.
100%. With the thing about Alex Jones, just as a side tangent, is 50% crazy bravado, just showmanship, and then there's 15% of really good information because he thinks outside of the box. And then the rest of it's like, I don't know. Now it's become like very religious lately. But as soon as he jumped on the Trump train, I was kind of off the Alex Jones train because I just listened to him for years. I just always had. Like I was just always, like you said, like I will go to this extreme place. I'm listening to Alex Jones. I'm listening to the Young Turks. I'm listening to the Kill Stream. I'm listening to Red Ice. Like I'm all over the place. I'll just do that just for fun. I just want to hear what let me hear what everybody's got to say. What's the take everybody's got?
Right. There's an iota of truth in everything, but
because I'm not looking for an ideology. I'm not looking for perspective because I feel like I have my principles. Well, let's see what you guys have to say. Can you change my mind? Usually not. I'm a good Catholic boy. Okay, raised Catholic.
But going back to the source material, I mean, they make no. They don't cover up at all the fact that all these troops are under hypnosis.
Yeah, 100%.
All of them are under hypnosis. All of them are taking drugs prescribed by the MI.
Yep.
All of them, and he's revealing all this information, telling you about how he knows that his shakes can't actually be fear. Well, I can't be feeling fear because I'm hypnotized and doped up. And the MI therapists have all said to me that it can't actually physically be fear. It's just kind of my nerves trembling.
Yeah, and this is what HEINLEin does. HEINLEin fucking mentions this shit in passing. He never focuses on it. It's like a paragraph.
Yeah, and like that, the line about hypnosis is, he mentions it a couple of times, and the one time he mentions it as basically a tool to keep soldiers in their bunks so that the ship can turn off of its gravity field while it's in warp drive, which they call Chekhov drive in the book. And so, he's revealing to you that all these soldiers are under hypnosis and brainwashed, but he's doing it to just let you know that, it's so they'll just stay in their bunks so they can turn the gravity off to save energy while they're going through warp speed. And you're right. It's not this thing that he puts out in front of you and is like, these people are brainwashed. That's a tragedy. He mentions it as part of a logistical item for another thing he's talking about.
Well, it lets you kind of feel the way you want to feel about it. It's very grown up. It's very adult. It's like, I'm not going to tell you how to feel about this because that is a lot of what Starship Troopers is like. He's not moralizing. He's kind of letting it just the world speak for itself. I'm not sure. I don't one of the things I picked up on when I was listening to it again. I was like, I'm not sure if Johnny Rico is a reliable narrator. I'm not sure. I don't think he is. I think he has a very skewed perspective of what's going on in the world, and that's something I think you pick up on subsequent readings or listenings to.
Right. I mean, he's very much a soldier, and he's coming from a soldier's perspective.
Yeah, that's why I think when a lot of people read crazy shit into Starship Troopers, the book. They oh, it's so sexist. Oh, well, at least they mention the women and listen to how he talks about the women and they're just there to be objects and just no, that's Johnny Rico's perception of what's going on.
Right.
He's a guy that's fucking can go out and die and he's well, a heterosexual male is motivated by this promise or this that's the power of women over men. This gesture, do this for me, oh good sir.
Right.
Yes, madam. I will jump out of this in my power suit. You said, when they say over the intercom, get them, boys. That's the whole point. Because you're just they are this kind of broad white knight. They're the great white knight. I'm going to do this for you, baby. They're never going to think that literally, but that's in your subconscious, that's there.
Yeah, and, he mentions about how, he kind of goes crazy over women when he sees them because he never sees them.
Oh my God! Because he goes into this whole fucking diatribe where he's just some boys they acted like they didn't like girls even though they did. Not me, not Johnny Rico. I always liked the dames. I always liked those babes.
But he one of my favorite lines in the entire book is when he's describing how women walk.
Yeah,
and he says, their legs aren't the only thing that moves. Everything moves and all in different directions and it's all graceful. And, you might be able to take that line as a sexist objective line, but dude, Listen to the beauty and symmetry that he's describing the female body with.
Exactly.
It's graceful. It's
enticing.
It's beautiful.
This is why
it brings men to their knees.
To their knees. Brings nations to their fucking knees. Look at Cleopatra. Come on. I mean, I totally agree. I think that it's so fucking bizarre that we have this thing where we're just not even allowed to say that, like, the female form is beautiful. Everybody, it's a beautiful thing.
It in such a flattering way as Heinlein puts it. And let's face it, women are not the focus of this book.
No,
his main love interest, Carmencita, is in the book for a few paragraphs. But this is the story from a perspective of a soldier who's going out to space to fight space bugs.
Well, exactly, because it's not supposed to be from everybody's perspective. It's from Johnny Rico's perspective. It doesn't make any bones about that. Like, it's not like trying to create this broad view of the universe. And you have to learn. You literally have to learn everything from context clues.
Right, and even with the soldier's machismo, listen to the way he talks about the female character, Captain de la Draya. He talks about Captain de la Draya. He literally says, if God needs someone to help keep the stars in line and in orbit, he should call Captain de la Draya, because she pulls off that maneuver where the dropship isn't going to make it back up to the Roger Young in time, but she makes a braking maneuver that is supposed to be automated, but she overrides it so that she taps it just enough so that the Roger Young gets there. And he speaks of her with such high praise. And then later she ends up tutoring him with math.
Yeah.
Do you remember that part of the book?
Yes, because he's bad at math,
There's nothing negative about women in the book. It's just that it's from a soldier's perspective, so women aren't really present in the narrative all the time.
It's actually very egalitarian, in a sense, because it's like everybody has a role, everybody has a function, and everybody is kind of equal. It doesn't matter how Rico feels about how women look. It really doesn't. Because, like, in the moment when it matters, he just cares that there was a result.
Right.
He just loves the fact that, like, okay, women have better reflexes, better response time. That's why they're the better pilots. That's why they're better at certain things. And he respects it. He respects it as being part of this larger piece.
Right. Which is another thing that the movie completely throws out the window with basically the superwoman trope that, this was one of those movies that was like an early adopter of the superwoman trope, which is not like the Sigourney Weaver and Alien badass, but still having to overcome this huge
but still being a woman.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Like when Dizzy, who I want to mention, the character of Dizzy Flores in the book is one of Rico's comrades that dies during a drop in the first chapter.
Yeah.
The character of Dizzy Flores in the movie is a completely different female character. They turned her into a female so that she could be like yet another love interest for Johnny Rico to further complicate the Denise Richards love triangle. Completely unnecessary. But like Dana Patrick's character, it's Dana. Wait, what's her name? Wait, Dana Patrick, isn't she a race car driver?
I believe so, yeah.
Who's the lady who plays Dizzy? It's
something Myers. Danny Myers?
Dina Meyer,
yeah.
She walks up to Zim right at boot camp.
And fights him?
Girl, and this is just a girl who has a crush on Johnny Rico, who followed him into the MI so she can be near him, and then she like starts duking it out with Zim in boot camp.
Yeah.
So like this movie definitely had the old anything boys can do, girls can do better thing. It's like, okay, well,
she does lose. She does lose.
She does lose, but it's like, okay, the fact that she can even carry the gun that they use is,
no, I agree.
Kind of an exaggeration.
I could let it go in a movie like Starship Troopers. I can just be like, okay, whatever. Like
certainly, and in Starship Troopers, the movie, it works, but it loses that thing from the book where there is the delineation of the sexes,
and not in a bad way. It's not negative. It's actually they complement each other. They motivate each other. Like it's just like in real life. Just like in real life, everybody.
Like the way that males and females interact in nature.
Yeah,
which is to complement each other.
Yes. Exactly, like but
the movie kind of throws that out so that we can have
a little bit, a
lot of different stuff that, whatever.
That is Verhoeven's bag. He is like a, it's weird. Like Verhoeven's like this, like kind of like a, like if I were to describe him, he's a little bit of a sexist misogynist, like masquerading as some sort of champion of women. and he's
so
really
like a nice guy. He's like a nice guy feminist.
Yeah, no, he kind of is. I mean, like, watch, like, not to bring it up, but watch Showgirls, watch Basic Instinct. You're just like, okay, Verhoeven. Like, don't tell me you're fucking, like, making a nice pie and shit in my mouth. And like, honestly, and if that's his perspective, that's fine. Like, I don't really, honestly, don't care. I will judge the movies on their own merits. Like, it's whatever. But when he plays this game where he's just like, just women, just the feminism. He does it to this day. He's still doing it. He made this really provocative, really intense movie a couple years ago called Elle. This French movie called Elle. And it is a very weird, intense movie about sex politics and about a woman that gets raped, but like doesn't hate the fact that she got raped. And like starts
to very French.
Yeah, starts to kind of like fantasize about it, like starts trying to recreate the scenario with her rapist.
Right.
It's a very weird movie, but it's like actually a really good movie. It's like really intense. It's really like it's got actually some shit going on. But when he just starts going into his fucking, I don't know what he does sometimes, man. Like, he has rewritten the history on Showgirls. I watched Showgirls, so I went down a rabbit hole of Showgirl stuff, and I know I promised I wouldn't. But he's just like pretending that he didn't mean to make the movie he did. It's very weird. Verhoeven is a little bit of a hack, everybody, and I'm sorry to reveal this to you, but he is basically...
glad that we're on the same page there.
Yeah, he's basically as good as the writer. I think that is the thing. If he can be inspired by a clever writer, I think he's good to go. Like, I think he's made enough stuff where I can give him the benefit of the doubt. Like, if the writing is solid, he will deliver. Even though I think, Starship Troopers, speaking of Starship Troopers, like, I don't know if he knew what entirely he was doing, but somebody did. And I think it does show in the movie. I really do. And I think that just that Verhoeven over-the-top flair does sell it to you. It makes it fun, like we said earlier. It's just a fun ride. Even if you were just to watch it superficially, it's a fun movie to watch.
Yeah. Yeah, when I watched it when I was younger, I didn't know what was going on.
No.
But the things were blowing up, and...
yeah, you're like, yes, I would like to know more. Yes.
Yes, I would like to know more. And that's when, I got the book and I found out that there's a lot more and it's a lot better.
Well, it's a lot more intellectually stimulating, the book, because at the end of the day, I do think the book is more of like a social critique and philosophical book. Kind of wrapped in this sci-fi, which is the job of good science fiction.
Right.
If you're going to look at the art form of science fiction, that's why, and I know someday we'll talk about this, but that's why I've come around to thinking that Star Trek is the far superior science fiction apparatus than Star Wars.
I agree with you. I never thought I'd say it, but
I know, because I know you've been watching TNG, and you're like, these stories are timeless. Like, the production value, sure, we can all complain, it's cheesy, it's like kind of saccharine, but you're like, these stories are good. I get my wife all the time, dude. She's like, what are you watching? You watching fucking Star Trek? You're going to make me watch Star Trek when we go to bed? Yeah. And then she gets wrapped up.
Yeah, no, Caitlin has, actually Caitlin makes me turn on Star Trek now.
Yeah, they're good stories. They're good stories.
Yeah.
And they take 45 minutes to tell and you're done.
Right.
Go on with your life. I don't need to watch some serialized drama that's going to take 60 hours of my existence to see whether it was worth it. I can watch 45-minute episodes and be like, that was great.
Right. Or that was a total flop, and now I can move on.
And now I can move on. Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, man, I mean, actually, I'm a bit running out of notes over here, but going back to the very, very beginning, you asked me how I, became a fan of Starship Troopers, and I didn't ask you that question back. So now that we're getting towards the end of things, why don't you bring it all around HEINLEin style and tell me how you got into Starship Troopers?
My parents were not the most discerning people in the world, which is weird because they were Catholic, like really Catholic.
Right.
But movies, for some reason, were like this blind spot where they're just like, yep, it's Saturday. We went to the Four Corner store. We rented some movies. We're all going to watch them together no matter what. If there's sex, you just fucking go under the blanket. You'd be cool. And Starship Troopers was one of those movies. And I just immediately kind of viscerally responded to it. And because, just like you, I didn't know what the hell was going on. I didn't know what it was about. It's just a cool adventure movie. It's so well put together. Like, It's hard not to just enjoy it on just a very superficial level. Whether it's just from, like, the bug killing stuff, it's got every little element of a story and a growth of a character that you can follow that you just kind of, like, can grasp onto as a young man.
Right.
And I'm so happy we did this because it gave me an opportunity to read the book. The book has been on, like, that hypothetical that in your brain stack for like 15 years. Same thing with like Dune. It's been there forever. And I'm just finally now getting around to it. And this gave me the impetus to do that. And what I found was like something kind of really bizarrely complimentary. And it actually makes me think about the other more than I would have without the other thing. You know what I mean? So the movie makes me think about the book more. The book makes me think about the movie more. But like at the end of the day, though, like it's terms of the movie. It's just like a fun movie. I can even still to this day, I don't need to go get all deep and critical about it. Normally, when I watch Starship Troopers, I am not being critical about Starship Troopers. I'm actually just kind of excited to watch Michael Ironside. I'll be honest with you. Like that's really what. Like every time I'm like, yes. He points the stump at Denise Richards, like, I wonder what the Godfathers of Hiroshima would think about that. And you're like, yes!
Well, yeah, he really is. Ironside is the true MVP.
Well, because it's great, because you don't even, when you're a kid, you don't even understand what the fuck he's saying. But you're just like, yes! Yes, Michael Ironside, this is the coolest shit I've ever heard.
No, yeah, and that's the power of his presence. Like you said, it's almost like a fatherly kind of thing where he's so wise, but he's just not taking any bullshit either,
No.
And that inspires a certain feeling in a man. That's what a good leader is. And Rico talks about this in the book. He said there's nothing that and actually real military guys say the same thing. I listen to a lot of Jocko Willink stuff and David Goggins stuff, and they say the same thing. There is nothing worse for a group of people being led than to hear panic and uncertainty in their leader's voice. Mm-hmm. And, Ironside plays that wrath check certainty perfectly. Mm-hmm. He knows even if he's wrong, he knows he's right.
Well, even in the scene, like when they're about to be overrun by the bugs, they find out it's a trap. He just goes about his business. He never panics. But Ironside seated in, there is this like anxiety in his voice. Like there's this little thing, but he's just not going to project that out.
Right.
But you can tell he's like, we are fucked. We are fucked. That's why I picked up on this most recent rewatch. I was like, this is why you hire Michael Ironside. This is the good stuff.
He's one of the only people on screen during the movie that's actually doing any acting.
Yes.
Everybody else is kind of just like giving a stern look and reading a line.
Carmen! Fucking Casper Van Dien. Love him in this movie. But holy shit.
I mean, in much the same way that like Keanu Reeves is successful in The Matrix because he's playing a computer program.
Yeah.
Casper Van Dien is successful in Starship Troopers because he's playing a soldier who takes orders without any question.
Yeah.
And everybody else in the movie, like Hank from Breaking Bad.
Breaking Bad, yep.
Everybody else is just giving a stern look and reading their lines, and we're in this military world and blah blah blah. And then Michael Ironside comes in and starts putting a little nuance into shit, and you're like, wow.
Yeah. Oh,
but
he's the best. He really is the best.
Yeah, no, he's as far as the movie goes, I think Ironside's one of my favorite parts of the movie easily.
Oh, he is the MVP, other than, of course, the beautiful Denise Richards, who is like the accidentally MVP.
Right.
That was, it's casting, that's direction. Got to give Verhoeven, I got to tip my hat, because I saw it when I watched the unnamed movie. I saw when it went bad. It went bad when he did it wrong. So.
Yeah, it certainly can. It actually kind of went like Operation Bughouse in the Battle of Clondathu. It was just an 18-hour slaughter fest that, you don't remember much from it except that it was terrible.
There's a lot of flesh. Let's just say there's a lot of flesh and jutting. Holy shit, what a weird movie. If you ever watch that, let me know.
I probably won't. I gotta tell you straight up, and probably.
Oh, you and Theo, you guys get together, just be like, son, let me show you when things go wrong.
I'll show you what not to do as a director.
This is what happens when you hire Joe Esterhaus, the guy who wrote Flashdance, to do your morality play.
Yeah, that's
yeah, I mean, the only other note I have is what did I write? Jesus. No, Ratchek may be a subtle allusion to fascist Russian communists in the context of the movie. That's why he's the only person in the movie that has a Russian last name. Oh, and he's the one that in the movie that advocates for political violence and whatnot and about force, which is in the movie considered. I think you're supposed to kind of take away this fascistic sense of it, where in the book it actually makes the philosophical argument that is just the way life operates. So I think honestly, I think some of the movie is a little bit of a misread. I think it's a pedantic kind of childish misread sometimes of the book. I don't know if they did that on purpose or not. Like, it's really hard to kind of discern that. Even listening to interviews, even listening to the audio commentary, I'm like, did you, like, how much of this is you misreading the novel, and how much is this is you like being a smart writer, being like, oh, we're just going to do something different. We're gonna flip it. You know what I mean? It's really hard to tell, honestly.
Yeah, the movie is a bit slippery in that you can't ever really get a handle on where it's coming from or what the creators wanted to tell you with it. But that's one of the things I like about the book, is that it's much more straightforward. I mean, certainly Heinlein has his subtleties, but I think that I understand what the message of the book is. Maybe that's me misreading it. Maybe that's me having a little bit of hubris and saying, oh, I know what he was talking about. But it seems like the book has a much more clear message than the movie does. And it's not sarcasm either.
I 100% think it does, because it's made with like a purpose. It's made like to actually have this philosophical conversation, whereas the movie is kind of, it's being mass entertainment and also a satire of fascism at the same time, and I don't think it sticks the landing all the time. I think it sticks the literal landing at the end of the movie. I do think it is something that most people miss, is that it is telling you that you were watching an in-universe movie.
Right.
Which when I saw it this time, I was like, holy shit. I was like, that's kind of great. That's kind of brilliant. This is literally a movie that the people that are existing in this world would go see. They would go. This is their. They made a propaganda movie a couple years ago with like real Navy SEALs. Do you remember what the hell that was called?
Was it like Zero Dark 30?
Well, Zero Dark 30 is straight up propaganda, because they were like, the government even came up to like, oh, we didn't have anything. We didn't give them permission. We're very upset with the movie she created. I'm like, yeah, okay. If you were upset, it never would have came out. Fuck you. No, but there was literal Navy SEALs, quote unquote, and they made like a movie. Oh, I can't remember it. Everybody at home, you look it up. You leave it in the comments if you can find it. Google that. I'm sure it's not hard to find. But it was like it's kind of like a parallels like what Starship Troopers would be to the people in that universe, as that movie was to us. So it's kind of interesting. But I think there's as much as I think the book is better, obviously, but I do think it is interesting to read the book and then watch the movie and look at what that conversation is, because I do think there is an actual thoughtful conversation going on about the universe of Starship Troopers and what is the possible kind of permutations of those solutions to a problem.
Yeah, I agree, and that's kind of one of the reasons why I'm never going to slag the movie too hard, because it opens up that conversation to new avenues, and it does take kind of an inverted approach, as you said, but it's an approach that kind of needs to happen with a story like Starship Troopers. You know, it's fun for the book to have a silly little brother that you can just kind of take in as a piece of popcorn when you want to sit down and watch an action movie, and not get bogged down with all of the pretense of the book. But at the same time, you know, the movie doesn't have any of the pretense of the book, which is very important. And it's, you know, there's a lot of great shit in that. And, you know, one of the reasons I wanted to talk about them both is because I kind of see them as almost not the same piece of media, but they, like you said, they really complement and converse with one another really well.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it would do an injustice to talk about the movie without speaking about the book. And I think Heinlein would probably kick my ass if he heard me say this, but it kind of does an injustice to the book to not talk about the movie.
Yeah, I think he would kick your ass for saying that. I sent you that clip the other day, and that was a documentary that was about Heinlein. I have the movie version of The Puppet Masters, and there's like a 30-minute like biography of Heinlein. And that there's one of the talking heads was just like, if Heinlein had seen Starship Troopers, he would have strangled Verhoeven. Because it's like it is such an inverse of the intention of Starship Troopers. But I think, you know, at the end of the day, I think Heinlein would have been smart enough and thoughtful enough to be like, I understand what you're saying. Like, I get where you're coming from, because the book is from a very specific point of view. It's very, I don't want to say like one note. I don't think that's the right word. Because it's varied. Like, he makes arguments, and he uses history to do so, tangible history as well, not fantasy history. Like, he's talking about things that we understand. But yeah, I would like to think that maybe Heinlein would maybe appreciate something of Starship Troopers, the movie. I don't know. I could be wrong.
Probably appreciate Denise Richards, you know what I mean?
You're like, look at those bazoombas. Why wasn't she in the shower scene? Holy shit.
Oh yeah, the famous co-ed shower scene.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that's kind of the end of my notes too. What was the other thing that I had? The only thing that I had was that I think it was an interesting attention to detail that all the adult citizens in the movie are maimed in some kind of way.
Yeah, because they're all war heroes.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, they're all either, like, the teacher's blind, Rathcheck doesn't have an arm, the recruiting officer is missing like an arm and both legs.
Well, there's actually this would be maybe a good thing to end our discussion on. I think it was really interesting the way that society and the people that did the good work thought of their service. They did not brag. They did not talk about it. Like, you know, so Rathcheck, or yeah, was it Rathcheck with the one arm?
Yeah.
Like they don't, or was it Dubois? Wasn't it Dubois?
Well, in the book it's Dubois, but in the movie
okay.
it's Rathcheck.
Well, in the book, I mean, it's Dubois, and he never brings it up in school, in class, when he's trying to teach them about the importance of civic duty. He never brings it up. He never talks about it. Johnny Rico does not find out that Dubois was like a war hero until he's in boot camp, and Zim finds out that he gets a letter from him, kind of calling him a pussy, and being like, "I'm glad you're not such a pussy anymore." Right. Yeah. But like, that is something I think there's something being said there. It's like this idea that like the work is greater than the brag. Like, not everything has to be some sort of braggadocious thing. You're doing it because it's the right thing to do. You're not doing it for the glory. We, as citizens, as people, we get to glorify you. But to glorify yourself is kind of verboten. It's kind of just not, you shouldn't do it. Which is why when you meet people that like to talk about themselves, you're like, fuck you. Honestly. I mean, that's like, you know, when people are overly braggadocious about themselves, you're just like, you check out. And I think that was an interesting element of the book that I noticed. And I think it's something that, if you're going to take anything away from Starship Troopers, the novel, even the movie, it's that, like, give a shit. Care. Do something. Give a shit. I don't care what it is. Fucking Put some effort into something, please. For Christ's sakes. I will pay way more attention to you if you fucking try. That's all I'm going to say. If my son learns anything from me, it's like, try, care, fucking feel something, please. Anyways.
Yeah, and if my son learns one thing from me, it's going to be, hey, look, service equals citizenship, bud. Okay, so if you want to be a citizen in this house, you better do some fucking dishes. Okay.
Yeah, right. You see that trash can? It's pretty full. You want to say in what we do for lunch?
Yeah, but I don't have any more notes now. I think we've been going for quite a while.
Almost 3 hours, Dan. We almost hit the 3 hour mark.
Oh boy, yeah. I don't think that my bladder can actually hit that mark. But I had my whole glass of water, my entire dandelion tea, and a little glass of bourbon. So I think I'm about ready to pop. I'm glad for you having me on again because I've been waiting to talk about this for a while. And I'm glad that you took the extra time to listen to the book because it's not something that I get to talk to a lot of people about. And it's actually something that's really informed my present existence recently.
That's awesome, man. No, I appreciate the opportunity to do so. And I think what's been cool about doing these lately with like you and especially Paul is that like these deep dives. Like I'm going in and we're like reading and learning shit and it's cool when you have the material that can actually spur that on. So I'm very very thankful to having done that. I'm very thankful for the conversation. I had a great time. This is awesome. Talking Starship Troopers with somebody for 3 hours, like hell yeah. That's awesome. We get to have this little reprieve from our actual lives, like our actual responsibilities and all the things that it entails. We just get to like hyper focus on something that we think is cool and that we care a lot about. And I was happy to have my care even grown by reading the book. Like it's something now that I can't wait to kind of go back to it. And like I'm ready to rediscover it with my kid. And like I think it's going to be a really fun thing to re-experience with him in a couple of years. So it's I'm very thankful for that. So thank you for not only bringing up the fact that we should talk about the movie, because we could have talked about the movie for like an hour. That could have been an episode. But I think the broader conversation of what the book brings to it is so much more interesting. It's just so much more fun, so much more to think about, so much more to talk about. And I really thank you so much for giving me your time. You're a busy guy. You work hard. You wake up early. I'm sure you're looking at your Jocko clock. Gotta get up.
Yeah, buddy. The Jocko clock comes every day at 4:30. Actually, you know what? You know what's funny is the Jocko alarm that I set on my phone. Theo beats that every day. He's got the 4 o'clock fuss.
Yeah, I gotcha.
The 4 o'clock fuss is when he needs to. It's like he makes it through most of the night, but then all of a sudden, like the diaper needs to be changed at the same time he needs to eat, and that's normally right at 4 a.m. So I've been getting up before the alarm clock because of that little bean. But tomorrow I might sleep. I might sleep in just a little bit tomorrow because we're getting to about midnight. But that's the cool thing about owning my own business is that I can kind of shift my schedule. People say, "Oh, you can make your own hours," and it's like, no, dude, the meat makes my hours. But
to a certain
degree, kind of fudge the edges a little bit.
Yeah. Well, hey, man, I appreciate your time because I know it is valuable. So I really do.
Well, I love coming on here, and whenever we do this, it's something that I end up looking forward to all week and thinking about a lot. And
Me too. It's cool not just to like reconnect with an old friend, but it's cool to get into this stuff to this degree because it really does like encourage you to be like, how would I really get into it? I'm really gonna go for it. And then you kind of find that discerning line between like art and movies, like art and shit. Like you're just like, this is something about the human experience that we can talk about. We can talk about broader. We got to talk about tonight we got to talk about society and what's going on. I think it was a wide-ranging conversation, but it all got to surround and envelop Starship Troopers. Right. I really, really respect and appreciate that. So thank you so much for your time, Dan. Like seriously.
Thank you, Sean, for having me on.
All right, everybody. If you would like to know more about Zoobox, you want to follow Zoobox, and who wouldn't want to follow Zoobox? I mean, come on. You've heard this conversation.
Would you like to know more?
Would you like to know more? There's a bunch of links in the description for Facebook, for Instagram, and my personal Twitter. Also, if you'd like to make a recommendation, there's something you want to hear, whether it's on Zoobox Goes to the Movies, maybe you'd like to hear me and Dan talk about a movie. Recommend it. We're looking for kind of an outlier that we maybe disagree on something. So that could be interesting. So if somebody could come out of left field, it will not be Showgirls. If somebody comes out of left field with something, we would appreciate it. So thanks a lot, Dan, and thanks everybody for listening.
Thank you. Have a good night, everybody.
Oh, hello. Took a snapshot, did you, buddy?
Oh, there we are. I have no idea what I did.
This man is a Fed. He has just taken a picture of me on Skype.com.